Chapter 1. Celeste. I was going to be sick, and the toilet was too far away. I ran as fast as I could, knocking my knee painfully against the bathroom door frame as I rushed into the tiny room. Ow! The heat in my face rose, and I grabbed for my hair, holding it out of the way as I launched my body forward. Ugh! The acidic bile rushed up my throat and into the toilet bowl, splashing against the sides and making me retch and choke even further. The smell burnt my nose, and tears rolled down my cheeks, until finally, mercifully, it stopped. I reached for the thin toilet paper beside me, pulling it from the roll and dabbing at my mouth. I swallowed hard, though my mouth was too dry. Yuck. Oh, dear God! That was terrible. And it hadn't stopped yet. Every day I'd been sick. Every morning, to be precise. Until about lunchtime. For 2 weeks. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I'm in trouble here. The front door to the apartment banged open, and I jumped up off the floor and took a seat on the toilet, my head spinning with fatigue and low blood pressure. Celeste! I pushed the bathroom door quickly shut and pulled down my pants so it looked like I was using the toilet for something more than vomiting. In case he came in. Like he had done many times in the past. There was no such thing as privacy if you were a member of the Little Rock Bear's Den. I called out to him. In the bathroom! I'll be out soon. The bile rose again. Oh no. My gut churned and tightened. I closed my eyes and forced the vomit back down, swallowing hard against the automatic reflex to let it all out. I couldn't let them know my secret. I couldn't. They'd never forgive me. Loud footsteps walked up the hallway, then a fist pounded the door, hard. I jumped, shivering with fear. Hurry up! The voice was rough and loud. The kitchen isn't going to clean itself, woman! I rolled my eyes, but only because he couldn't see me. If anyone in this place knew the kitchen needed cleaning, it was me. 1 minute. Sorry. I'll be right out. He grunted and walked away. I relaxed against the commode as I heard his footsteps fade away, my whole body shaking with stress. How long was I going to be able to hide this from the den? And when they finally found out, which was inevitable, what would they do? Force me to get an abortion? Or something worse? I exhaled in a long sigh. Time to get moving before he came back and dragged me out. I opened the bathroom door and moved to the sink to splash some cold water onto my hot cheeks. Uncle Dennis, my adoptive father's brother, was my employer. He had set me up to work 7 days a week in a job no one else would do, cleaning this run-down block of apartments. The Bears owned the apartment block. Some of the floors were rented out to outsiders, but the rest were occupied by members of the den, including me. And the way I paid for my tiny bedroom in this apartment I shared with 4 others was to clean every bathroom in the block. All 46 of them. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, garnering whatever self-preserving courage I had. Just 1 step at a time. You can do this. I walked to the old kitchen and grabbed some saltine crackers from the cupboard, crunching on the only thing that seemed to keep the nausea at bay. I took a moment to allow the food to reach my belly and settle the queasiness, and then I got to work. Of course, it wasn't just my job to clean every bathroom in the block of apartments. It was also my delight to clean the kitchen and the entire apartment I slept in. Even though 5 of us lived here. I had just finished wiping down the benches and cleaning out the kitchen sink when my nose began to burn with a sudden foul smell. My throat convulsed. Oh no. The others were back. Then the front door flew open and 3 burly, bear-shifting men walked in. Great. My uncle was front and centre, strolling in with two of the others who'd shunned me when they found out I was human. The smell of them. Oh my God. I couldn't hold in the need to throw up the second their musty stench hit my nostrils. I rushed to the newly cleaned kitchen sink. My back heaved as my stomach emptied the meagre contents I'd managed to keep down. "What's going on with you? You sick again?" My uncle's voice was angry, annoyed. Like it always was whenever he spoke to me. Or at least, like it had been ever since I reached maturity and the bears had decided I was unworthy of a mate. Not a single man from the den had wanted me. Not that I'd wanted any of them either. But it hurt. Despite all my hopes and dreams of a real family, I'd been rejected. Wholeheartedly. I nodded and rinsed out my mouth as quickly as I could. Yeah, sorry. I'll get back to cleaning." I kept my head down, attempting to walk around the 3 man mountains standing in the middle of the kitchen. Each smelled as bad as the other. "Stop!" The command in my uncle's voice made me freeze. Or as close as I could, considering I was shivering like a leaf in the fall breeze. "What?" My uncle bent down and smelled me, sniffing loudly, before his lip curled up in a snarl. "You smell even worse than usual. Almost like a wolf." My eyes closed, and my stomach dropped to my feet. They knew. They must know, and they would punish me for my mistake. Rough hands grabbed my chin and forced my head up. "Open your eyes." I did as commanded, and Uncle Dennis's eyes bored into mine. "Tell me. Now." "What? Tell you?" I was stammering, I was so scared. My arms and legs shook. Goosebumps covered my skin. I felt as if I would fall to the floor if he let go of my jaw. "Lou, Davy, come here and smell her. Tell me if you smell what I do." Oh God, no. I kept my arms pinned to my sides and tried not to breathe. This was the most humiliating thing about being part of this family. They all said I smelled weird. Worse than weird. Bad. Disgusting. Or that's what the bears said. So I scrubbed myself clean 3 times a day, even taking antiseptic into the shower some days to disinfect myself. It hadn't changed anything. They still hated me and said my smell made them sick. "She's knocked up," Lou grunted. "Yeah, but by who?" Uncle Dennis growled. He shifted his grip to my throat and forced me backward until my spine touched the wall. I gasped for air, trying to control my growing panic. No. I grabbed for his hands and pulled on them, trying to loosen his grip, the pain making my head spin. He squeezed tighter until I couldn't breathe at all. Oh God, am I going to choke to death, right here, at his hand? "None of us wanted you, so it can't be a bear's baby. Who was it, you little I couldn't lie. I had to tell them the truth. I'd been lonely and desperate, and the man I'd met made me feel more loved in a single hour than I'd ever experienced my whole life. He released me enough that I could finally answer him. "Just a guy. In town. At a bar." Uncle Dennis dropped me to the ground. I inhaled quickly, needing the air. I stayed where I was, on my hands and knees. I wasn't getting back up just to be knocked down again. I'd learnt that lesson the hardest way, many times over. As one of the only non-shifting women in the whole den, I was the weakest by far. I had the scars and the healed broken bones to prove it. "It smells like a wolf," he growled above me. I kept my head down. They weren't talking to me. "We always knew she smelled like them," Uncle Dennis said. One of their human mates, Lou spat. What? I listened intently, though I tried not to show how interested I was. A wolf's fated mate. How was that possible? I knew about the concept of fated mates, of course. I'd lived among the bear shifters for long enough. But I was human. That seemed impossible in my mind. You know the Alpha doesn't want the wolves getting any more of them, Lou growled, and I heard Uncle Dennis's sigh. Any more of them? Of what? Humans? Mates? What are they talking about? Let's take her to the Alpha and find out what he wants to do with her. They hoisted me to my feet, and I went with them without complaint, even though the Alpha, Trevor, terrified me even more than Uncle Dennis. Being submissive to the bears had kept me alive and relatively well fed. I relaxed as much as I could, calm descending over me. It was probably unnatural and unhealthy, this calmness, but I'd known this day would come, sooner or later. They'd realise I wasn't suited for their den, and they'd either kick me out or ship me off somewhere. But now that the worst had finally arrived, my shakes and panic seemed to disappear. My mind worked faster than it ever had, focusing in on the one thought that mattered. There was more than me at stake now. My baby needed protection from the men who towered over us. There was only one thing to do. As soon as I got the chance, I had to run. And thanks to Lou inadvertently spilling the beans about my wolf-like smell, I now knew where to go for refuge. Tate, the alpha wolf shifter from the bar, had said something strange the night we met. About a woman, a doctor, who was the first human mate they'd found in town. I'd memorized that piece of information somehow through my alcohol-fogged brain. My baby and I needed protection, and the daddy wolf who had made this baby with me was the only one who could give us the protection we needed. Death. They'd sentenced me to death. The family that had taken me in as a baby and raised me. The family I'd slaved for all these years, whom I'd tried to love to the best of my ability. I'd spent years caring for their children, their homes, and this was the result. With a single word from the new alpha, Trevor, they decided I needed to die. I still couldn't believe it. They'd all turned their backs on me. I sat in my locked bedroom, still stunned at the turn of events. They had chosen to kill me in the morning because tonight they were too busy with important bear pack stuff to bother with a little human like me. They probably thought I'd never even consider escape. But they were wrong. So wrong. I placed my hands gently over my stomach. I had the incentive now, and I wouldn't sit around and wait to be killed, like they probably assumed I'd do. Idiots. They hadn't even bothered to chain me up. In the past, I'd always meekly fallen in with their plans. Not this time. Not when my life, and that of my growing baby, was on the line. As soon as the noise of the pack quietened down halfway through the night, indicating that most, if not all of them, were finally asleep, I managed to pick the lock and break out of my bedroom. I'd done it before, when they'd left me alone, in case I ever needed to get away one day. Not that I thought I'd ever actually need the skill. But it wasn't difficult with the old locks, and a couple of hairpins bent in a particular way. I crept through the apartment, avoiding the creaking wood panels I knew by heart, and ran. Through the exit door into the stairwell, down the many flights of stairs, and out into the cold night air. I didn't even stop to shiver in the tank top and thin jeans I wore. I just started running. Through the city, heading for the hospital. Toward the woman who might be able to help me. A doctor named Claire. God, please. The Bears' apartment block was as far away from the inner city as they could get, almost on the outskirts of the city, in fact, but the streetlights lit my path, showing me the way to safety. My heart galloped in my chest. My throat burned as I gasped air in and out of my lungs. And I didn't stop. As soon as the bears realized I was gone, they would chase me, and I'd be done for. I had no protection, no weapon. The only things I had were my 2 legs and the will of a mother fighting for her child's life. It had to be enough. I kept running, city block after city block, though my tired body screamed at me to stop. Adrenaline pumped harder through my system, and I increased my pace, turning corners as quickly as I could. The streets were deserted. It had to be past 2 a.m. I didn't really know the exact time. I kept going, pausing to breathe at an intersection to get my bearings, my chest heaving with exertion. Which way? They didn't let me out into the city very much, and I wasn't familiar with the street signs, though I'd lived here all my life. I looked and looked, then saw a sign I recognized. Yes, the supermarket. It isn't far from the hospital. Keep going. I pushed off again, my legs screaming at me for those first few steps until I found my rhythm once more. The hospital, safety, was about 6 blocks now by my reckoning. My thigh muscles burned as I tripped on some uneven pavement, but I kept running. The night was silent, except for my ragged breathing. I could only imagine what would happen when the bears woke to find me gone. Growling and screams of rage would follow. I knew their tempers, their fighting and hunting abilities. I'd watched them my whole life. And if I became the hunted rather than the observer, then I was as good as dead. Unless I could find her in time. Claire. The doctor. I turned one more corner and ground to a halt. There it was. A huge white building with bright lights and doors that opened automatically. I staggered the last 100 feet, my energy depleted and my body relaxing as my safe haven was finally in sight. I stopped on the sidewalk, fear skittling through me. The bears would be able to track me straight here if I went inside the hospital right now. They'd already tracked Claire there once. I had to throw them off the scent, at least a little. Damn it. I staggered to the right, going another block down, though fear truly raced along my nerves now. I ripped off my tank and dropped it onto a park bench. I walked to the next bench and took off my jeans, leaving them beneath the seat. Oh my God! It was freaking freezing. I jumped up and down, clad only in my old underwear, and then ran back to the hospital. Hopefully that would help. I ran straight into the emergency room and the bright lights enveloped me. I was shaking, freezing, panting and I felt as if I were about to drop to the floor in a faint. Nurses rushed at me from everywhere, with blankets and juice and nice words. They admitted me straight away. "What's happened, dear? Were you attacked? Shall we call the police?" An old nurse was preparing a bag of fluid, and as she came for me, needle ready to put in my arm, I stopped her. "Can I please have a shower? I smell bad, and I'm so cold." My scent would be greatly reduced after a shower. And thanks to the bears grabbing me early yesterday and then locking me up, I hadn't had one in over 24 hours. "Of course you can, after we've done a few tests." I stood up. I couldn't let her win this one. "No, please. It's important. I'm pregnant and I need to see Claire." "Claire?" The nurse blinked and put down the needle. "She's not working tonight, but I may have someone else who could help you." I shuffled toward the shower room. "Please. I just need 2 minutes in the shower, then you can test me as much as you like." The nurse nodded, and I jumped into the shower, scrubbing my trembling body with the sterile-smelling soap and even washing my hair. Someone had left some shampoo in the stall, and I couldn't resist. I didn't get that luxury much at home. "Here you go." Someone stuck her arm into the cubicle and offered me a fresh white towel. I turned off the water and reached for the towel. It was clean and fluffy. "Oh, that's heavenly. Thank you." The person behind the door laughed. "What's funny?" I asked, frowning her way, though she couldn't see me. Surely the fact that a hospital towel was the cleanest piece of linen I'd seen in my whole life wasn't to be laughed at. "I'll explain in a sec. I was told you came in with no clothes. I had some spare yoga pants and a sweater in my locker." She placed the bag just inside the bathroom, then shut the door again. Tears prickled in my eyes and I blinked them back. "That's, so kind of you." I quickly dried my body and wrapped my wet hair with the towel. The yoga pants were the perfect size, though a little tight around my tummy, and the jumper was snuggly and warm, though way too big. How tall was this woman? I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. I was red and blotchy, but clean and safe. I'd take it. When I stepped out of the bathroom, there was a young nurse sitting on the bed. She grinned at me with a lazy confidence I'd only seen in the extremely powerful shifters in my den. All men. I'm Celeste," I said. She grinned. "Nevaeh." Nevaeh? I'd never heard that name before. "That's why I laughed. You said heavenly. My name is Heaven spelled backwards." I stared at her, wondering if she was joking. She laughed. "It's true. Hippie parents. I used to hate it, but since meeting my guys, I don't stress anymore." Had she just said guys? As in more than one? She didn't answer my question, though. Instead, she pulled her cell phone from her pocket. "I know you wanted to see Claire, but she's at home. She's pregnant and working less hours. Why did you ask for her?" Nevaeh's tone was casual, but I had the strangest feeling she knew why I was here. That's great about her being pregnant." Maybe I shouldn't have come here. I didn't know these people. How could I trust them? This was a stupid idea. I edged toward the door. I think I'll get going." Nevaeh stood up. "Hey, don't freak out. You're pregnant too?" I hesitated, then realized I'd told the first nurse the truth. So I nodded. Nevaeh moved around the room and gestured to the bed. "I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. Have a seat and I'll explain." I had pretty good instincts when it came to evil intent, and as I reached out with those senses, I came up with nothing. Okay. I walked back to the small bed, climbed onto the thin mattress, and pulled the blanket over me. It was so nice to be warm. Nevaeh stepped toward me, her movements slow and non-threatening. "Mind if I put the drip in now that you've showered?" I nodded. "Sure. Not for me, but for the baby." I rolled up my sleeve and she walked the rest of the way across to me, sliding the needle into my hand effortlessly and then taping it down. Wow, she was good at that. "You need your fluids," she said, as though that explained everything, then sat again in the chair by the bed. "Look, Celeste, I'm willing to tell you everything about me and Claire, but you have to show me that you need to know. If you know what I mean." She smiled and waited. I got the drift and sighed. What did I have to lose at this point? I've lived with the bear shifters just near the edge of town for most of my life. But they found out yesterday that I'm pregnant and they decided to kill me. Me and my baby. So I ran. Nevaeh slid to the edge of her chair. "Holy shit!" "Yeah." Then she snorted. "Sounds like my last month." "Sorry?" What?" Nevaeh shrugged and met my gaze. I'm not sure if you heard what happened with Trevor and his dad, but I'm the female that Trevor was stalking. She was the girl. My gaze ran over the woman in front of me. Tall, thin, and super pretty. You're the one who killed our alpha. I was shocked. I'd expected someone so much bigger, stronger, and more shifter-like. Nevaeh nodded. Unfortunately, yes, that's me. He was trying to kill my mates. She looked a bit regretful, but not overly sorry. And I didn't blame her if what she said was true. Trevor's our alpha now. I never much liked his father, but Trevor's just as bad. Worse in some ways. Then I slammed a hand over my mouth. I couldn't believe I'd actually said that. Such a comment would have normally gotten me whipped or my arms broken. Nevaeh winced. I wish I'd gotten him too. Bastard. Then her gaze zeroed in on me. So why are you here, Celeste? You obviously know about the shifting world. And you're running from the bears. How can Claire and I help you? And how did you know to come here for her anyway? I licked my dry lips, and Nevaeh handed me a bottle of water. I smiled with gratitude. She was being so nice to me. I needed to be honest with her. I heard about Claire from Tate, a guy I met in a bar a couple of months ago. He told me about his town and how Claire was the first female mate they'd found in years. Nevaeh's eyes opened even wider. Tate told you about the pack? About Claire? She looked surprised and a bit upset. I jumped in to defend him. They probably weren't allowed to tell humans about their world. Yeah. He could smell the bears on me, so he knew I lived with them. And he was pretty drunk. So was I. I'm not sure he meant to tell me so much, but don't worry, I never said anything to any of the bears about Claire. They knew anyway, somehow, that the wolves had found their first mate. That's why they'd tried to keep you away. Wait a minute. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place. You're a wolf mate, too. Her lips stretched up into a huge smile. Yes, I am. But do you mean two as in like Claire, or do you mean two as in like you? She raised her eyebrows, and my hands flew to my still flat stomach. I didn't want to answer that, and if I were being honest, I didn't really know the answer. I was going only on the word of the bears. What would they know about wolf-fated mates? Is Tate the father? Nevaeh asked quietly. I waited a heartbeat, then told the truth. I nodded. Yes, that's why I came here. To find Claire. To ask for her help in getting to the pack. I know I come with a whole lot of trouble at my back, but I need to find Tate and see if he will be willing to protect me and the baby. Nevaeh pulled her cell phone from a pocket and began pressing buttons. Who are you calling? It's probably 3 a.m. 3:30, actually. Nevaeh put the phone to her ear and gestured for me not to stress with a flutter of her hands. Trust me, Grayson's gonna want to hear this. Chapter 3. Tate. I woke so abruptly from a sound sleep it was like someone had physically thrown me out of my warm bed. What the? Someone was banging on my front door, and they weren't stopping any time soon. My eyes sprung open and I jumped out of bed. Tate, what's going on? My beta, Sam, yelled from the back of the house as I jogged down the stairs. No idea, I called back up. We never had this sort of drama in the middle of the night. It was still dark out. Like pitch black dark. I turned on a light in the lounge and opened the door, my eyes blinking rapidly to adjust to the artificial brightness. Morning, Grayson said, stepping inside without an invitation. Unusual for an alpha. We didn't invade each other's houses like this. It wasn't respectful. Still night, I mumbled, rubbing my eyes clear of sleep. But come on in, Grey. Then I chuckled. Oh, that's right. You're already in. What the hell is going on? Grayson grinned at me. Put your coffee pot on, Tate. You're going to have a visitor soon. You and your pack need to wake up. Despite my confusion, I stumbled to the kitchen and put the kettle on like he suggested. Grayson was one of the few selfless alphas in our larger pack of wolf shifters. If there was anyone I trusted beyond myself to care for my beta and omega, it was Grey. "What's going on?" Sam asked, as he practically fell down the stairs. He slept like the dead, that one. Dane, my omega, walked downstairs more slowly, already pulling a tank over his bare chest. I only wore the trackies I slept in, and didn't see any need to dress further. The omegas were always more self-conscious than us alphas. "Hey, guys," Grayson greeted them, too cheery for this early in the morning. "You going to tell us why you're here, Grey? Something wrong?" Grayson had found his mate last month and gone through hell to get her away from a bear shifter. His next-door neighbour, Dexter, had been the first to find a human mate in the pack. I didn't know Dex's pack well, but to say I was jealous of their newfound happiness would be an understatement. "Nothing's wrong. I got a call from Nevaeh at the hospital. Seems a woman staggered into emergency last night looking for Claire." The hairs on my neck prickled up. Ever since that night 2 months ago when I'd told a stranger about Claire, I'd been worried something like this might come up. "Is Claire okay?" "Yeah, she wasn't working tonight. So Nevaeh looked after the girl, and she's bringing her home now." Huh? Nevaeh was bringing another human female here to the pack. Why? And why was it worth waking us in the middle of the night to communicate that odd piece of news? Sam and Dane stared at me, clearly confused. Then the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place for me. This girl, blonde, blue eyes, about 5 feet tall. She had been tiny and sweet and very sexy if my drunken brain hadn't exaggerated the details of that one-night stand. Not sure. I haven't met her yet. But she asked for Claire by name at the hospital, and she told Nevaeh that you were the one who told her about Claire. Grayson gave me a hard look, and if I'd been inclined to blush, I would have. Instead, I thrust my hands into my track pant pockets and shrugged. "Yeah, I did. And I'm sorry about that. I was drunk and she already knew about the shifting world. It just kinda slipped out. Seemed natural to tell her, actually, in a weird way." Sam looked from Grey to me. "So, what are you here to say? Is Tate in trouble?" Grayson turned to Sam. "Have you two met her? The girl Tate slept with a couple of months ago." My eyebrows flew up, surprised by Grayson's swift change of topic. Dane shook his head. Sam said, "No. He mentioned it. But that night we were working late. Tate went into town with another pack." I frowned, trying to remember the details of the evening. I couldn't believe I'd had so much to drink. Why hadn't I waited for my own pack to join me for the trip? That was usually the way we did things. "Oh, yeah, that's right," I said, as memories started to come back to me. "It wasn't even my night to go into town, but with the news of Claire, I wanted to get in there and at least start looking." Grayson glanced at his cell phone. "Well, you may have met your destiny that night, Tate. Looks like she's almost here." Grayson stood up and went to move past me toward the front door. I stopped him by grabbing his arm. "What do you mean? Are you telling me she's my fated mate? That's impossible." There hadn't been any of the signs. No fainting, no intensely sweet smell, though I'd been drunk off my arse, not to mention the fact she smelled of bears. "Grab a coffee, guys, and then make your way over to our place, all three of you." Grayson shrugged out of my grasp, gave us a grin, then headed out the door. Dane turned to look at me. "Do you think it's possible, Tate?" I don't really know." And I didn't. Sam crossed his arms over his chest. "And if she's your mate, does that mean she's ours as well? Like with Grayson and Dexter?" I grabbed our travel mugs and Dane brushed me away, taking over the coffee preparations. "Thanks." He did coffee making better than me. "Well, we better get dressed, I suppose." I glanced down at my body. I wasn't sure how Nevaeh would feel if we turned up like this. "Yep. See you back here in 5. Sam jogged back up the stairs. I was slower. My brain still hadn't quite woken up yet. Gray hadn't waited for the sun to rise to share this information, which must mean he was excited by the news. But why? Was he so interested in building the pack that he was going to foster off a one-night stand to me and my pack in lieu of the real thing? A wave of sadness hit me. I wanted so much more than that. I craved my fated mate. A woman to complete our small pack. Someone to come home to love and cherish. I was old-fashioned that way. And being born in this era, where there were no wolf-born women, was both frustrating and depressing. I pulled on jeans, a long-sleeved shirt and some nice shoes. May as well dress up a little for the meeting. I trotted back downstairs and the guys were waiting by the front door, coffees in hand. "Here," Dane said, handing mine over. It was hot to the touch and warmed my hands nicely. "What's wrong, Tate?" Sam asked, as we closed the door and began the walk toward Grayson's place. His pack's house was on the other side of the central shops. "Just worried I'm about to be disappointed." There was a beat of silence around us as my words settled with my pack. "What's she like? Do you remember?" Sam asked suddenly. What did I remember? I'd tried so hard to suppress any thoughts of women of late. It was too painful to be reminded of our loneliness all the time. I remember feelings more than anything else. She was sweet, and as drunk as I was. I shook my head. I didn't want to leave her, but she took off straight after we had sex and the other pack dragged me home. I remember feeling the need to go look for her, but being talked out of it. Seriously, I don't have much. I shook my head and swallowed my coffee, trying to settle the strange feelings shivering through me. I was nervous and tense. I stretched my neck from side to side and heard satisfying clicks and pops. We walked up the street and stepped onto the sidewalk in front of Grayson's house. The lights were on, the house lit up like a Christmas tree. But there was darkness all around. "Do you smell that?" Sam said, lifting his nose to the air. I did. There was a faint, sweet, "Oh, my God." It was her. The three of us raced for the front door, opening it and barreling into the house like a bunch of eager puppies. I righted myself quickly while Sam and Dane took their time, their reflexes not as sharp as mine. Her smell hit me like a cloud of perfume. Instant, hot and perfect. My gaze met hers, and all the memories came flooding back. Of her lips against mine. The softness of her body beneath my hands. The tiny gasp of pain as I took her for the first time. "You were a virgin." Her eyes widened even further. "Oh, damn. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that aloud." She had been, though. Looking back, I should have known before that point. Her reactions had been too innocent, her enthusiasm too real. The pain in that first thrust, too true. There was an elbow in my side as Dane and Sam waited to pounce. "Oh, Dane and Sam, this is Celeste." Her name rolled off my tongue like it had always been there. Great save, memory. Celeste stood up and walked toward me, the oversized clothes not suiting her. "It's you." She reached up to touch my face like I was the dream, not her. I leaned into her caress, wanting to feel her skin against mine. She was so tiny, I'd forgotten just how fragile and delicate her tiny frame had been. She cupped my jaw, and I turned my face to kiss her smooth palm. The gasp that ricocheted through the room deafened me. She began to crumple. I swooped down to scoop her up before she hit the floor, and I began to shake as pleasure pulsed through every vein and muscle at the feel of her beautiful body in my arms. I heard a female voice in the background, behind the rushing of blood in my ears. "Sam, Dane, touch her as well. Get it all over and done with in one go." I didn't understand what the woman meant and bared my teeth to my pack as my Omega and Beta rushed forward to put their hands on my mate. She cried out as if half waking up, violently arching her back and shivering all over. Then she passed out fully again. I glared at Dane, then Sam, fighting my wolf to stay down, and they backed away. Grayson stepped closer, and I snarled at the other alpha. He needed to stay away from my mate, or so help me God. Then Nevaeh was there, pushing Grey back, away from me and my mate, and slowly stepping toward me. "It's okay, Tate. You've got her. She's safe now. I brought her home from the hospital for you. No one's going to take her away now. It's all right." Her words made sense. I knew that somehow, on a rational level, but I couldn't seem to interpret them properly. My wolf was crawling up my back, exploding through my humanity, fighting to get out and take over. Protect. I had to protect my mate. No! I couldn't control the shift. Horror slammed into me. I was going to hurt Celeste because I couldn't contain my wolf. I yelled at my Beta. "Take her, Sam. Quick." He rushed over, and even though I'd called him, demanded his help, a possessive growl erupted out of my throat. Somehow I found the strength to release Celeste to Sam, and then I backed up to the front door and managed to wrench it open moments before my wolf ripped through me. Muscles transformed, fur sprouting through my skin as my clothes shredded and fell to the ground beside me. I shook myself as the transformation completed. I looked around the room through my wolf eyes, everything in black and white and grey. My mate was here, safe in Sam's arms. Safe with my pack. Though Grey was still there, across the room. My lip curled up as I glared at him. Not when Celeste and I were still unmated. But I couldn't stay here. I had too much energy to burn off. Grayson met my gaze calmly, nodding after a moment as though he understood. "I'll come with you." He walked toward me, stripped off his shirt and jeans, and his shifter emerged. The silver wolf matched me in colour and size. An alpha. He nudged me in the shoulder with his head, and we took off together, running through the woods. Running away from my destiny at this point. So that I could return, clear-headed and stronger than ever, and accept whatever path my destiny led me down. Chapter 4. Sam. I stared down at the beautiful, tiny woman in my arms. My mate. And yet, I had no idea what to do with her. I certainly didn't want to put her down. "You can lay her on our spare bed if you want," Nevaeh suggested, gesturing to the 4th bedroom in their house. I shook my head, feeling stubborn. No, I'd rather hold her for a minute. Nevaeh smiled gently. Sure, but how about you guys sit down at least? I'll put some breakfast on. Brad laughed and patted Nevaeh on the back. She means I'll put some breakfast on. The woman burns toast on a daily basis. Nevaeh shrugged good-naturedly. Told you when we mated that I couldn't cook. Aaron, Nevaeh's other mate, stepped up and kissed her lips possessively, then pulled away with a grin. Yep, we don't love you for your cooking. Nevaeh blushed prettily, and I began to relax. She was right. We needed food and time to wait for our mate to wake up. I found my way to an armchair and sat, pulling Celeste closer into my body and arranging her head on my chest. I loved the sensations that ran through me while I held her, while her scent rose up and tickled my nostrils, while tendrils of her hair fell across my bare arms. So, what do we do about this, then? I asked, and everyone else in the room laughed. Everyone except Dane, that is. He had his gaze firmly fixed on Celeste, and he pulled up a chair next to me, obviously not wanting to be too far away from the diminutive female. Aaron and Nevaeh jumped onto the couch together, and Brad went to the kitchen to make whatever he was going to make. None of us liked to cook in our individual pack, so I was hopeful our mate had a little more skill than Nevaeh seemed to have in the kitchen. But if she didn't, who cared, really? We'd managed okay so far, and takeout existed for a reason. No, like, seriously. I have questions, I said, repeating my earlier query. What do we do now? And how do we know if she's just Tate's mate, or ours as well? I brushed her long blonde hair off her face and stared down at her. Even though her eyes were closed, she was beautiful. But she seemed very young. And how old is she? She barely looked legal. But surely Tate wouldn't be stupid enough to have taken her if she were underage. My stomach tightened at the thought. Tate had already had her, been inside her. My wolf growled, and I tightened my hold on her. Relax, Aaron said from the couch. I know you're feeling all sorts of weird, possessive, jealous crap, but it'll pass. Just, focus on something else. I glared at the other beta. You mean I should forget that my alpha's already had her? Aaron nodded. Yeah, definitely. Because when she wakes, you'll all have her, and she'll love all of you. Have faith in the system, my friend. I grunted, not able to find the words to tell him to get in an eloquent manner. The anger in me began to rise. Soon it would reach boiling point. I had to get a grip on myself. I took a few slow breaths, but it didn't help much. Didn't they understand how frustrating this was? You might want to put her down now, Aaron said, and this time I heard the demand in his tone. I forced myself to breathe deeper, to think. Aaron was right. I was only getting worse the longer I sat here with her draped across my lap. Brad called from the kitchen. Through that door, Sam. The bed's good to go. I followed his directions and placed her down on the large bed in their spare room. Dane was right behind me, staring down at her. She looks like an angel. I nodded. Yeah, she does. Her golden hair spread over the duvet and encircled her face like a halo. I turned and walked away, unsettled by the way she made me feel. Angry, possessive, and worried. When I got back to my seat, my wolf finally began to relax, to settle. I could breathe again. Though tension still held me in its grip, the anger dissipated. Told you, Aaron grunted, and I nodded at him. Yeah, He'd been right. "Thanks." "No problem," he said. "Don't forget, we've been where you are, man." Brad stepped into the room then and placed food in front of us on the low coffee table. Pancakes, sliced fruit, cream. Wow. The Omega had said he could cook. He clearly wasn't kidding. "Eat as much as you want," Brad said as he put down a bunch of plates. We all served ourselves, the distraction of food helping with the strange mood that had gripped me. I piled my plate up as Brad went back to the kitchen to make more. I looked at Nevaeh, the one who'd brought us our mate. "What happened tonight at the hospital?" She picked up a strawberry, dipped it in the cream, then ate it before she answered. "It was a bit crazy, actually. I was just finishing my night shift, and one of the nurses came in to say that there was a woman in the ER. She had stumbled in dressed only in her underwear, freezing cold and asking for Claire." She had been what? I stared at Nevaeh. "What do you mean?" "She was running around town in the middle of the night in her underwear." Had fate sent us some sort of cuckoo? Nevaeh shrugged. "I went straight to her and she was already in the shower, scrubbing herself clean. That behaviour, combined with the fact that she said she used to live with a pack of bear shifters, made me think she probably took off her clothes to knock them off the scent. She's young and pretty timid, but there's no doubting she's smart." Pride blossomed in my heart at the same time as panic whistled through me. "She was living with the bears? How is that possible?" Nevaeh shrugged, seemingly unworried by this turn of events. "I didn't ask her. But seeing as Trevor deliberately dated me, then stalked me for years to keep me from finding you guys, maybe they did the same thing with her. Maybe they smelled the wolf mate scent on her, the same way Trevor smelled it on me." Dane gasped beside me. "And she somehow escaped them. A whole bear pack. And went straight for Claire. Pretty amazing for anyone to achieve that, let alone someone young and timid like you say." Nevaeh began picking at her pancake, eating small pieces of it with her fingers. "I agree. Though, given she was drinking in the pub the night she met Tate, it's likely she'd be at least 21, I think." "Well, that's comforting." Dane sat forward on his chair. "And how do we know if she's our mate, too?" Aaron answered that one. "Did she smell super sweet to both of you? Like, intoxicating?" I looked at Dane. "Yeah," we both answered in unison. "She shook and gasped when you guys touched her, even after she'd touched the alpha," Nevaeh said. "Yeah? So?" I said. Nevaeh grinned. "That's another sign she's your intended mate. It looks like you guys are very much designed to have one mate for your triad. Like us." Stark relief, unlike anything I'd ever felt, raced through me. Tate wouldn't leave us for Celeste, and she wouldn't leave us for him. Dane and I wouldn't be left alone without an alpha or a mate. "That's great." The front door banged open, and I looked up. The sky outside was decorated with red and orange hues now. A perfect sunrise. Grayson and Tate paced back into the room, still in wolf form. Grayson shook his pelt and stood up, rising from his silver wolf into his massive human form. He grabbed his clothes from where he'd left them and pulled them back on. I glanced across to Nevaeh and watched her devour him with her eyes. Hopefully, my mate would look at me like that someday. When Grayson was dressed, he stared down at Tate, who hadn't yet turned back. "What's wrong?" Tate looked toward Nevaeh, then his clothes, which had been shredded by the force of his abrupt change. "Oh, right. Yeah, hang on." Grayson trotted up the stairs and came back a few minutes later with a pair of jeans and a sweater. I almost laughed. Tate was embarrassed to be in the room with Nevaeh, but earlier he'd shredded his clothes like a teenager, changing without even thinking about afterward. Here. Grayson laid the clothes on the back of the couch, and Tate raced over to the other alpha, let go of his wolf, and stood up. I tried to distract Nevaeh as Gray's expression hardened and the tension in the room increased. Alphas were territorial, and this situation was uncomfortable for everyone. Anything else you want to tell us, Nevaeh? About our mate? Nevaeh grabbed another strawberry and bit into it. She's tough. I can tell you that. I saw a few scars on her, no doubt from injuries she's sustained over the years. Trevor is violent, and I'm guessing many of the other bears in that pack are too. She may look fragile and innocent, but she'll have some strength to her. Tate, now dressed, walked over to where Dane and I sat, and stood behind us. That's good to hear, he said. I hoped fate wouldn't send us a mate who couldn't cope with our world. Oh, she can cope all right. Those bears are rugged creatures. Nevaeh shuddered. If she lived with them her whole life as a human, then she's tougher than any of us realize. I could feel that Nevaeh was leaving something out. I stared at her, narrowing my eyes, and she glanced around the room as though avoiding my gaze. There's something else, isn't there, Nevaeh? Something you're not telling us. She looked at Tate and back to me and Dane before nodding. There is something else, but I can't tell you. Why not? She smiled gently. Because Celeste will tell you. There was movement behind Grayson, where he sat on the couch. It was her. It was Celeste. She was up again. Dane and I jumped to our feet, and Tate released a low rumble and crossed his arms over his chest. It seemed that none of us could be still when Celeste was in the room. She walked out into the lounge, her beautiful blue eyes shining at us with a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't seem afraid of us, though. Whatever she was fearful of, it wasn't a bunch of wolf-shifter possible mates. She just came straight over to us, looking from Tate to me, to Dane and back again. Did I pass out? She asked, in a voice that sent ripples of awareness over my skin. She was so beautiful, I couldn't believe it. Soft skin, shiny hair, big blue eyes. Yes, though your recovery was pretty quick compared to Nevaeh, Grayson answered. Celeste put her hands into her pockets and glanced back at the other pack's alpha. That's probably because I'd met Tate before. God, you're beautiful, I said, without thinking, and she turned her head and smiled brightly up at me. What's Nevaeh talking about, Celeste? Is there something we need to know? Tate asked. She nodded. There's lots of things. Like my background, the bears, everything. But I think... She turned around to look at Nevaeh. I think she meant one specific thing. It's the main reason I'm here. We waited, the air around us completely still with expectation. You would have heard the proverbial pin drop. And that is, I prompted, dying of the suspense. She lifted her gaze to meet Tate's. I'm pregnant. Chapter 5. Celeste. As soon as I said it, my secret, my truth, I heard the swift intake of breath from 3 shocked shifters. I wanted to laugh at them. Was it really so difficult to believe that after a one-night stand there'd be consequences to our actions? My hands went reflexively to my flat stomach, which wouldn't be flat for much longer. I was over 8 weeks along now, and Nevaeh had said that wolf-shifter pregnancies were slightly different than normal human ones. I'd be bigger, and I'd likely show quicker. My gaze was still connected with Tate's, and because of that, I think, the other 2 men backed away. To give us room, perhaps. I wasn't sure, but the further away they went, the more the tension in the room seemed to rise. Tate, on the other hand, stepped closer. "Are you certain? Are you certain it's mine?" That was what he was really asking, and I glared up at him. The guy was 1.5 feet taller than me, so I had to crane my neck. "Considering you're the only man I've ever slept with, and I'm 8 weeks pregnant, vomiting and freaking out, then yeah, I'm certain." Part of me marvelled at the way I was speaking to an alpha, and the other part of me cringed a little, wondering if I would be punished for such forward, transgressive behaviour. Uncle Dennis would have backhanded me into the opposite wall if I'd ever tried to speak to him that way. Tate was so big and strong, and clearly an alpha leader. Usually, a man like that would terrify me. But even on the night we met, he'd been so sweet, so loving, and I hadn't been afraid at all. Instead, I'd just known, without a shadow of doubt, that he was different from all the others. That's... He didn't seem to be able to find any words, so I jumped in to fill in the sentence for him. "What? Horrible? Terrible?" "A miracle," he breathed, and pulled me into his embrace, holding me tight against his body. I closed my eyes, rested my head on his chest, and sighed. Sighed away the stress, the disbelief and the hurt. I'd made it. I'd found him. The alpha. My baby's daddy. And it didn't seem like he planned to send me packing. Tate. Nevaeh's alpha, Grayson, cleared his throat. "How about you take your mate home? Get her some new clothes at the shop sometime today, and sort out your pack." When I pulled back from Tate's warm embrace, I could sense storm clouds rolling in. Not literally. These storm clouds were metaphorical ones. Centered firmly around the other two in Tate's mini-pack, Sam and Dane. Uh-oh. Nevaeh had said something about this being a triad of sorts. I wasn't quite sure what to say, but Tate cut across my bumbling non-answer. "Good idea, Gray," he said. "Thanks. And Nevaeh, thank you. We owe you. Like, big time." Nevaeh laughed. Yeah. Just look after her." "Goes without saying," Tate said gruffly, before hustling me out of the house and onto the road. Sam and Dane followed quickly, as if they didn't want to be left behind, but their shoulders were rigid, and neither of the other two were smiling. I shivered with the cold of the early morning air and everything I'd been through recently. "So, where to now?" I asked, looking at the 3 men gathered around me. I think we need to go home and talk about everything," Tate said, his gaze going to the other 2 men. "Okay." That sounded sensible to me. "Where's that?" I looked around at the clean streets and well-built homes. The town was incredibly impressive. I hoped I would get the chance to stay here for a while and explore. "This place is amazing," I sighed. "So fresh and well-maintained." Though the grass was a little sparse, and the town's main street clearly small and lacking in a range of amenities, I assumed that was due to the lack of females born to the pack in this generation. It still kicked the ass off anything the bears had. "This way." Tate put a hand in the small of my back, and I had to suppress a shiver of delight at his touch. We began walking along the street. There were more solidly built houses all the way along our route, and a group of shops were clustered in the centre around what looked like a town square area. The shops included clothing stores, a supermarket, and a barber. "I heard whispers about you guys from the bears." "What did they say?" Tate asked, as the other 2 walked closely behind us. Listening, probably, but not wanting to talk yet. Well, they said you couldn't have children anymore because there were no females born. Not for a whole generation. Tate nodded. Yes, our mothers were some of the last females born to the pack. Wolf shifters, too. We thought that meant that we'd never have a fated mate, but it seems like the future of the pack lies with humans. Like me? I asked, staring up at his handsome face. He was so much better looking than I remembered. My memory had not been kind enough to the strength of his jaw, his funky haircut, or his caring eyes. Yes, like you. He squeezed my waist a little, then stopped suddenly. Grayson said to get you something to wear, but I don't think the shop's open until 9-ish. He looked toward the other two men, who shook their heads. Okay, then we'll head home and come back later for that. That would be great. Thank you. The last thing I thought about when I ran from the bears was bringing clothes with me. And what I wore was some of the only decent ones anyway, so it was no loss. You did an incredible thing, Celeste. Escaping them. I could hear the admiration in Tate's tone, but I shrugged. I didn't deserve that much praise. I didn't really have a choice. I had to protect my baby. And I had to find you. He smiled at me with all the love I'd hoped for. I'm glad you did. We kept walking, and I began to feel strange. My stomach tightened and jumped around in excitement. Not a normal feeling for me. Amazingly, I could sense no morning sickness or nausea this morning, which was unusual. Whether it was due to the after effects of adrenaline from my frantic overnight run, or the sickness had simply run its course and passed, I was unsure. Either way, I was grateful for the small respite. "Which one is your house?" I asked, as I pulled my hands into my sleeves and curled my fingers into fists to keep the warmth inside. Assuming they had their own house. I wasn't sure how it all worked out here. Nothing about this place felt in any way similar to the life I'd led with the bears. "Are you cold?" Tate asked. A little. I'm not used to being outside very much. All my jobs kept me inside. And I was always moving, scrubbing, cleaning, or running from someone yelling at me. I wasn't used to the fresh air, nor so little fear. No problem. We're not far now. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and the gesture felt natural and comforting. We walked toward a large double-story house, similar to Nevaeh's home from the outside. But this one seemed wider, and there was more brickwork visible to the eye. Is this it? It's beautiful. I stared up at the house that could very soon be my home. It's like a house out of a magazine. I sometimes looked at the magazines in the stand at Walmart when I went shopping for the den. Tate opened the front door for me and gestured. Welcome. Wow. I looked back at Sam and Dane, who were watching me closely but still keeping their distance. I gave them both a small smile, then turned back to the house and took a step closer to the entrance. Tate suddenly whisked me up into his arms. I clung to his huge shoulders, pressing into his warmth. What's happening? What are you doing? He chuckled and held me tight. I'm carrying you across the threshold. Isn't that what you humans do when you mate? Heat flushed up my face as he carried me into the lovely home. It was even bigger inside than it had looked, with 12-foot-high ceilings and huge male-sized couches. Well, I grew up with shifters, and we aren't mated yet. I swallowed, waiting for the reproach for speaking out of turn, but nothing came. So after a few seconds I continued. But it's a beautiful gesture. Thank you. My stomach gurgled loudly. I gasped, putting my hands to my belly. Tate grinned. You're hungry. What can we get you? I swallowed hard as acid reflux made my mouth taste terrible. I have trouble keeping anything down at the moment. But if you have some water? Or plain crackers? The smallest of the three men, Dane, I remembered him being introduced as in Nevaeh's house before I fainted, marched over to the kitchen and pulled out a box. He brought the packet back and handed it to me without saying a word. Thank you, Dane. He was clearly annoyed, and although I wasn't sure exactly why, I knew I was the cause of it. And that upset me. Enough to make my stomach flip. I took the cracker box. I'm sorry. I seem to have done something wrong. His face softened, and his shoulders dropped, relaxing a little. It's not your fault. I know, I'm just. He looked at Tate and the other one. Sam, I remembered. I felt drawn to touch Dane, and I wasn't sure why. Perhaps an unconscious need to ease his obvious pain. But why? What is it? I asked, my hand half lifting. Instead of touching Dane, my hand was grabbed by Tate, who dragged me to the couch. Have a seat and we'll explain what's going on. I sat where he told me, amazed to find the furniture so new. So clean. And it wasn't just the furniture. The whole house was spotless. Not a cigarette butt or a beer bottle in sight. I crossed my legs and grabbed some crackers from the box, chomping on them and moaning softly when they settled the churning in my belly. Maybe I'd been too hasty in assuming my morning sickness had disappeared. Okay, I'm ready, I said, staring at them all. The three men stood before me like lecturers. Large, medium, and smaller sized. Each incredibly handsome, but in completely different ways. My stomach suddenly began to churn for a whole different reason. I lowered my gaze to the floor, trying to control the heat that leached up from my neck into my cheeks. Tate stopped and Sam rolled his eyes. No one was talking, so I decided I may as well help them. They seemed lost. Nevaeh told me that in this wolf pack, all the men have been put into male triad families. Yes. Tate nodded. An alpha. He pointed to himself. A beta. He pointed to Sam and then gestured at Dane. And an omega. I grinned. The perfect combination. The perfect family, Tate said. All we need is our fated mate to complete us. And that's me, I asked. None of this was surprising me. Quite the opposite. It was reinforcing what I'd already heard about the wolf shifters' fated mates, and what Nevaeh had said. I wasn't scared of these guys. On the contrary, I already trusted them. My gut instinct told me they would never hurt me. And I was more than a little fascinated. Tate's eyebrows lifted up and down. Well, yes. You don't seem fazed by any of this. I bit on another cracker and chewed. I'm not. Not that I'm complaining, but why not? Tate asked. Most humans would freak out at pretty much every aspect of this situation. I shrugged. I already knew about the shifter world that exists alongside the human world. I've lived in it practically my whole life. And I knew that you guys were doing the male triad thing. I don't mind looking after you all. My job back at the den was to clean an entire apartment block. 46 apartments. I allowed a touch of pride to enter my voice. That was a lot of apartments. And I can cook, too. 3 men would be easy to look after. I wasn't used to the sex side of things, but I could learn. Surely, it couldn't be that hard. Tate's mouth kicked up at the corners. You think we want a housekeeper? I looked from Tate to Sam and then to Dane, surprised by how happy and relaxed I felt in their presence. I wasn't sure I could trust this feeling. I didn't know them. They could be as violent and horrible as the bears if I gave them enough trust. But I kept going with my gut instinct, which told me this situation was nothing like what I had just fled. To be honest, I didn't have much choice, not with the bear's edict for death and my pregnancy. So I was willing to give these 3 wolves everything I had, in the hopes it would be enough for them to keep me. And my baby. At least it might be enough for us to be safe. Well, yes. Finally, I answered Tate's query. Isn't that the role? Housekeeper. Tate began to laugh, and so did the other 2. She's too beautiful to be believed, Sam said, collapsing into a chair. Well, that was a nice compliment. Maybe he wouldn't turn on me if I kept talking. I looked at him. Sam, why are you all laughing at me? He smiled broadly. Because we thought we'd have to convince you to mate with all of us, and you seem ready to jump straight into the role. He grinned again, and my belly tightened. Not with nausea this time, but with an arousal I'd never felt outside that one night with Tate. Sam was gorgeous too, and that smile of his was amazing. So was Dane's when I turned to study him too. 3 sexy guys, all staring at me, waiting for my response to a question I wasn't sure I had gotten right. Well, I didn't quite know how to process the fact that they all wanted me. At least, I think that's what he was saying. After years of being rejected by every member of the den where I grew up, the idea of 3 men all wanting to mate with me was as confusing as it was flattering. I can't guarantee I can satisfy you all in the... I swallowed hard. I've only had, the one time with Tate. But anyway... I put my hands to my burning cheeks, covering the evidence of how embarrassing I found this situation. I don't expect you guys to be faithful. The bears never were to their mates. But I'll do my best to satisfy you. The mood in the room changed instantly. One moment the guys were smiling and laughing, the next they fell silent. I shivered at the sudden drop in temperature. Did I say something wrong? Yeah. Tate stood up and began to pace. Fuck, this is a mess. He stopped and sighed. The disappointment coming off him hit me like a slap to the face. I tucked my knees up against my chest and wrapped my arms around my legs. Tears tingled my eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. How had I made such a big mistake already? Sam moved slowly over to my side. I put my head on my knees and looked at him sideways. Celeste, you didn't upset us. And we didn't mean to upset you. Quite the opposite. So let me explain a few things to you. As a pack, a family, we've been waiting for you, our fated mate, for years. When Dane and I touched you before, you responded to our touch in a way that means you're our fated mate too, just as much as you are Tate's. Tears slipped down my face, and I wiped them against my jeans. Okay. I didn't know what else to say. I already knew that, so why were they upset? I mean, that's good, isn't it? I still don't understand. Sam went on. And although we love the idea of you looking after our home for us, we're terrible at cooking and all those things. That's not why we want you. We know you already want Tate. You've gone to bed with him, you're pregnant by him, but we... Sam swallowed, and I could see the pain in his eyes. Dane walked across the room and sat next to me too, sighing heavily. Sam and I need you to want us too. We don't want you to, put up with us just because you have to. I looked from one beautiful man to the other. You both want me? I lifted my head so I could study them properly. Of course we do. For everything. You don't want to date other women? I couldn't believe that was possible. All the bear males cheated on their mates all the time. Dane laughed. Are you kidding me? I never want another filthy one-night stand ever again. I want a mate, we all do. But how can you really want us after? He trailed off, glancing up at Tate, whose massive frame towered over us all. Were they worried I wouldn't care for them after I'd met their alpha? I bit my lip, wanting to reassure them, but not totally understanding what their fears were. Tate and I have barely even talked. We met in a bar when I was blind drunk, depressed and seeking companionship to keep the loneliness at bay. Dane's gaze dropped, and I reached out to hold his hand. Tingles of awareness and attraction pulsed along his palm into mine. What is that? He smiled softly, dimples pressing into his cheeks. I think it's something to do with us being fated mates, he said. That's awesome. It feels good. It feels very good, beautiful. I stroked his palm, running my finger along the lines bisecting the flesh. So what do we do now, Dane? What would you like to do, Celeste? I looked from one man to the other. I wanted to curl up in a ball and feel their protection all around me. But how could I be honest about that? You can tell us. Could I really? There was only one way to find out. I took a breath and gathered my courage. I want to cuddle. All together. Could we do that? Tate chuckled and the other two grinned. We can do anything you want, sweetheart, although I'm not sure these two are going to be able to stop themselves from ravishing you. Oh my God, seriously? I blushed, heat flooding my cheeks once again. I still couldn't believe they all wanted me like that, instead of just as a housekeeper. After feeling ugly for so long, these three made me feel so wanted. I was 23 years old, and I'd had sex once. It was wrong. I wanted to remedy that, but how? I don't mind if you want to. You know I've only had once. I wouldn't know where to even begin. The men around me chuckled. I would, Sam said from next to me. Come with us, beautiful. I let him drag me to my feet and tow me up the stairs. My heart was in my throat, panic pulsing along my veins. The idea of being with three men at once made me want to vomit. Not from disgust, but from fear of disappointing them. But I had to push the fear down and trust the fated mate link. Even though I had no idea what I was doing when it came to sex, Sam tugged me into a huge bedroom. This is Tate's room. It has the largest bed. I glanced around. It was nice, but so male. So plain and blue. I shivered as they drew me to the bed and began to undress themselves. My stomach quivered, and I wrapped my arms across my middle. Tate gently took one of my hands in his. It's fine, sweetheart. Let's just lie down and we'll hold you. Don't worry, no one's going to seduce you today. I looked around the group and expected sullen glares. Instead, Sam smiled, and Dane stared at me with nothing but hope in his expression. The lack of censure over my obvious nerves made me want to try. For them. And for myself. I don't mind. My tone was shy, but hopefully they could hear the truth in my voice. Like I said, I'll never reject any of you. If you really want me. Tate chuckled. Come to bed, sweetheart, and explain all this to us. In the end, the men kept their jeans on, climbing into the bed half-clothed, and I stared at them, blinded by the huge muscles and clear, tanned skin. You guys are so perfect. Dane chuckled and Sam grinned. What do you mean? I asked. Come here, beautiful. Dane invited me with a gesture of his hand. He was by far the smallest, and his belly was like slices of granite. Perfectly square and hard, though less intimidating than Sam or Tate. I went to him and lay on the bed next to Dane. They moved around me, and it felt like a warm cloud enveloping me. I lay on top of Dane, and the other two kept their hands on me. My heart raced, and I tried to settle it down by breathing deeply. I waited for them to make their moves. But they didn't. They just stroked me, held me, and sighed beneath me. I couldn't believe it. Finally, I let myself relax, the tension in my muscles releasing into the room and somehow floating away. Tell us where this fear of acceptance and everything is coming from, Celeste. Tell us your story, Tate said, kissing my shoulder and tucking a stray lock of hair away from my face. So I did. I told them about me growing up thinking I belonged in the bear den, only to discover I was a human they'd found in the woods years ago. That none of them had wanted me, even the lowest of all the bear shifters. Of the disgust that the bears had shown toward me. Of all my years of servitude and struggle, and the anger and rage and moments of physical aggression that had led to broken bones and bruising. I talked about how I'd finally had the chance to get out and had gone to the bar that night to drown my sorrows. That night, I'd found Tate. And Tate actually wanted me. I still couldn't believe it, and some of that disbelief must have been evident in my voice. He laughed where he lay beside me, his leg thrown over mine. Of course I did. You were, and still are, beautiful, sweet, and quite obviously, as lonely as I was. I lifted my head off Dane's chest so I could look down at him. How come you guys thought I wouldn't want you? Dane ran his hand along my arm. Well, you've already been with our alpha. I was worried we wouldn't be able to compete. I smiled, hope filling me up like a waterfall into a tiny spring. And I assumed no man would ever want me, and that you three would have to endure me for the sake of the baby. Endure? Sam's voice was a murmur. Dane's hand slid down to cup my belly. My breath caught in my throat at the tender caress. It was the first time another person had recognized my pregnancy in a positive way. He didn't say anything at that point, but I knew he wanted to talk about the coming baby. How did he and Sam feel about me having the alpha's baby? Are you and Sam upset that I'm going to have a baby? I turned my head to look at Tate. Are you upset about it too? Tate's exclamation echoed through the room. Our baby is a miracle come true, Celeste. His sincerity shone in his eyes. As much as I loved seeing that, his enthusiasm didn't mean the others felt the same way. Tate rubbed my thigh. You know how we feel. I glanced at Sam, who was being very quiet, then to Dane. I know Tate's okay with it, but what about you two? How does it work? Shall I have a baby with each of you too? I didn't mind the idea. I wouldn't want anyone to feel left out. Dane swallowed. We'd love that, but... He glanced at Sam, who finally said, We want this baby to be ours too, not just Tate's. Oh, that sounded amazing. So you want to adopt it or something? Tate chuckled. We're a pack, sweetheart. Like Grayson and Dexter's pack. Claire's pregnant and they don't know whose babies she's carrying. They're simply the pack's babies. And they will all love them equally. Sam nodded. We would have liked to be there too, the night this gorgeous baby was conceived, and next time you get pregnant, we're going to have to insist, I'm afraid. He grinned at me, and I couldn't help but smile back. What a beautiful concept. He continued. But if you accept us as your mates, then we're going to say this baby is ours. I looked at Dane. Do you feel that way too? He grinned, those sexy dimples coming out to play. Of course. I'm not missing out on being called Daddy for another 5 years while I wait for my turn. I looked from one man to the next. Are you serious? You all want to be my mate? And you all want to be my baby's daddy? Like, seriously? I'd definitely died, because this couldn't be real. 3 hot, sexy and caring men who wanted to mate with me and claim my baby as theirs. After so many years of being alone, watching other people get married and have babies and being shunned by a whole pack, I couldn't comprehend that this might be my new reality. I could be happy here. Like, really happy. No way could I have found my own version of heaven. Could I? The chuckles around me rose and fell. Why are you all laughing? Tate turned my face toward his with a tug of my chin. Because, sweetheart, we're the ones who feel lucky to have found you. And it sounds like you feel the same way. Of course I do! I practically yelled at them. The bears hated me. I knew it even as a child. But I was a good worker and strong for my size. It was the only reason they kept me. As a slave, Tate said, his voice becoming dark and flat. Well, yes. I almost added, because what else is there? But then I held back the words. Because with these men, the possibility of knowing something bigger and better was right at the edge of my experience. I may not have ever known anything different, but perhaps it was possible to dream of something better in the future. Those days are gone, sweetheart, Tate said. In this home, you will have equal say, equal rights, and more loves and attention than you'll know what to do with. I glanced from one gorgeous face to another. It sounded too good to be true. And yet, sounds perfect. Tate turned my face toward him and drew me close for a kiss. Chapter 8. Celeste. I woke up to cramping and pain. Oh no! I grabbed for my stomach. The baby! Tate, who'd been asleep beside me, jumped up out of bed and stared down at me with a shocked look on his face. What's wrong? Panic gripped my heart as my belly tightened once again. I think it's the baby. I couldn't be miscarrying. No. Not after everything I had risked to keep it safe. What do we do? Tate was already pulling on jeans. I didn't know. What should we do? Do you have a doctor here? I checked between my legs. There was a lot of wetness, but I wasn't bleeding. Not yet. Claire, let's get you to Claire. Tate grabbed for my clothes and helped me dress, then scooped me up into his arms and ran down the stairs. I clung to him, but my grief sat on top of me like a cloud. He called to the others. Sam, Dane, we gotta go. Dane came running at the sound of Tate's voice. What's wrong? I sobbed when I saw him and reached out for my sweet Omega. Dane! Worry shadowed his expression, and he grabbed my hands. "She's cramping," Tate said. "There's something wrong with the baby." Sam walked into the room as Tate spoke, and I saw his face pale when he heard the words. The cramps hit again, the tightness and pain making me cry out. "Ow!" And another sob left my throat. "Oh no! I'm going to lose it, aren't I?" Tate dropped a kiss on top of my head. Sam ran to the front door and wrenched it open. "Let's go." They ran with me through the town, and I clung to Tate, burying my face in the crook of his neck and breathing in the comforting scent of him. What had I done wrong? Was it because I'd run away last night? Or because I'd let all three of them make love to me at once? Or was this always going to happen because I was a weak little female who couldn't handle a strong baby like Tate's? They rushed me inside a house I hadn't seen before. "Claire, help!" Tate's voice was urgent, and a nice-looking woman came rushing forward to greet us. This must be the doctor, Claire, that I'd heard so much about. She looked a little older than me. She frowned when she saw me in Tate's arms and quickly showed us into a small bedroom off the lounge area. "Put her down on the bed, please, Tate. Now, what's happened?" she asked. All three men started talking at once, and Claire stopped them with a wave of her hand. "You three go out and cool off. I'll help your mate, okay?" She literally shoved them out the door, and I called out, suddenly too worried to be left alone with a stranger. Human or not. "No, please. Can Dane stay?" I didn't know why I called only for Dane, but his calm strength was what I wanted in this moment. He'd been the first to make love to me today. The first one to kiss me. The first one to look into my eyes and make me feel incredibly loved. Dane looked at his packmates, unspoken words passing between them. Then he nodded and rushed back to sit by my side and hold my hand. I clung to him and turned so I could put my head on his lap. He stroked my hair, and I finally felt safe again. Claire pulled up a chair and sat next to us, studying me. This isn't the exact introduction I was hoping for the newest mate of the pack, but I'm Claire. I'm a doctor at the hospital where Nevaeh works, and I'm pretty sure you're the one who went looking for me last night." I stared at her from my place in Dane's lap. "Yes, I did. I'm Celeste." "Hello, Celeste. How can I help you today?" She was so calm. Her manner was lovely and soothing. I knew she would help me if she could, but if this pregnancy wasn't meant to be, then physician or not, she couldn't save it. I think I'm losing my baby." My throat tightened, and I swallowed the cry that threatened to rise up. "How far along are you?" About 8 weeks. I hadn't seen a doctor, of course, but my period was a month late. "Okay. Are you bleeding?" "No, not yet." "I don't think so." Claire stood up. "So, why do you think you're losing the baby?" I gathered my strength and sat up, wiping away the tears that fell down my cheeks. Another wave of pain hit. "Cramping." I put a hand on my belly. "Like you're getting your period?" I shook my head. "No, worse. It's like a deep soreness." Dane reached for my hand again and held it tight. Claire looked between us. "Have you been having sex this morning?" Dane leaned forward. "Yes. Why? Could that have done something? Is it our fault?" Claire smiled gently. "No. But from what Nevaeh said, Celeste is very inexperienced, yes?" She looked at me, and despite all the fear in my heart, I found myself smiling. She seemed so kind and trustworthy. Yes. Tate was my first, and that was 2 months ago. Claire grinned. And let me guess, all 3 of them doted on you and made you awesome this morning, probably for the first time. Now this conversation was getting embarrassing. I had to remember, she was a doctor. It was all right to discuss these things with your doctor, surely. Yes. Dane blinked at me. You didn't come the first time with Tate. I shook my head. No, of course not. Dane looked up at Claire, his mouth open a little. Claire looked as if she was biting back a smile when she said, Almost impossible for a... You 3 did well today, it seems, Dane. He looked away. It wasn't me, or Sam. It was Tate. Claire reached over and touched his hand, and I turned toward him too. Was Dane feeling bad about the incredible morning we'd had? How was that possible? Claire said, Dane, you don't know much about the mating triad yet, but you'll soon learn that we human fated mates need all 3 of our men. All of you equally. We don't do well without all of you. I slid my head back into Dane's lap and turned my cheek so I could kiss his leg. This morning was perfect. You were perfect. You all were. Equally. There was silence in the air until Dane finally slid his fingers through my hair once again. He seemed more relaxed suddenly. So, Doc, what do we do? He said. Does this mean the baby is going to be okay? It's just Celeste's body getting used to the aftermath of an orgasm. Claire shrugged. Look, I'll be honest with you. If Celeste is going to miscarry, there's nothing I can do. Miscarriage is very common, especially in first pregnancies, and it doesn't mean anything is wrong with the woman. It's just sometimes how things go, sadly. But most women go on to have very normal, healthy second pregnancies. I pressed my head against my omega, my heart aching and tears filling my eyes once again. Maybe it's for the best. I know you and Sam don't like the idea that I'm having just Tate's baby. I lost my words again and stopped talking, my throat squeezing shut with tears and pain. Oh no, sweetheart, don't say that. Dane pulled me up into his arms and held me as I cried. It hurt so much. I'd wanted a family, a baby, for so long, and now it was possible I was going to lose it. Claire left us alone then, and I kept crying. Sam came into the room and sat down on the bed with us, stroking my back and putting an arm around me. Tate hadn't returned, and I didn't mind too much, at least for a little while. Sam and Dane provided more than enough love and support. When my tears dried up, Claire returned to the room and got my attention again. I think you 3 have a bit to talk about, but from a medical perspective, Celeste, I'll tell you this. Rest today. See how things go. If nature decides to take its course, I can advise you then. But if this is what I think it is, which is lots of sex and orgasms in someone not used to it, then you'll be better by tomorrow and have no bleeding. So watch for blood, and if you're still concerned, I can take you into the hospital tomorrow and do an ultrasound. I clung to Dane and nodded. Okay, thank you, Doctor. Claire waved her hand at me. Stay here for a few hours. I have to do a little shopping and my boys are all out at work, so you'll have the house to yourself. Is Tate all right? I had to ask, given he hadn't yet returned. He's fine. I advised him to go make himself useful somewhere else so the 3 of you can bond for a little while. The triad thing can be hard when there's so many people wanting love and acceptance, but I can already tell that you 4 will be just fine. She left and closed the door, and I sagged into my men. I should probably check if I'm bleeding. I moved to stand up, and Dane grabbed my hand. Before you do, I have to say something. Okay. He looked at Sam, and they both seemed so sad. What's wrong? Sam coughed and cleared his throat. We're both, struggling with this. That you and Tate seem so much closer than we could ever hope to be. A wave of sadness washed over me, dragging me into the darkness. So you're glad I'm going to lose this baby? I nodded my head, the cramps in my belly continuing, though strangely, they were no longer as sharp. They were more like the pains of muscle strain now. Yeah, I suppose. I wiped at new tears. We can make more babies. Dane grunted as if in shock. Is that what you think? Before I could say anything in response, Sam grabbed my hand and pulled me over to him. Sit, sweetheart. I sat on his lap and looped my arms around his neck, putting my head on his chest so I could be as close as possible. The world was so cold and dark now, when only a few hours ago it had been filled with possibilities and hope. Celeste, we do not want you to lose your baby. I pulled away so I could look up at him, his brown eyes intense. I wiped at the tears that would not stop falling. You don't? Of course not. We were excited about being a family so soon. That part I understood. But you don't like that you weren't there. And if this baby goes away, then we can make one together. I was really trying to see the silver lining of this day. They shared a look that I couldn't read, and horror struck my heart. Unless, if you're only keeping me around because I was pregnant, does that mean you'll send me away now if I lose the baby? My arms dropped away from Sam's neck, and I began to fall into the abyss that swirled around me. I didn't know how I was going to pull myself out of this one. Where would I even go if these men rejected me? Sam grabbed for my shoulders and held me to him again, while Dane slid closer and cupped my face. Celeste, stop and look at us, okay? We know you've been hurt and betrayed in the past, and been unloved for far too long. But that isn't the case now. Not with us. That will never happen again. I didn't believe them, but I nodded anyway. Okay. Listen, and listen closely. We love you. Do you understand that? We love you. We don't want you to ever leave us. And whether we have one baby or 15, we will love them all. Because they will be a part of you and us. Our pack. A sob built in my throat and escaped this time. But how? It's the fated mate bond. You are our heaven, our perfection, and we will love you with every breath, every minute of every day, no matter what. I looked from Dane to Sam and saw the same stoic strength, the same heart that beat in them both. But you left me this morning. I felt it. You didn't want to stay in the bed with me and Tate, and I know this baby is unwanted. Sam growled a little, his chest vibrating with his breath. Your baby is not unwanted. He or she brought you to us. Without the pregnancy, we may never have found you. That was probably true, but I still didn't quite believe them. They were just trying to make me feel better, which said a lot about the strength of their characters and the beauty of their hearts. Thank you for saying that. Sam growled again. We aren't just saying it. Dane burst in with, we felt rejected, like we were third wheels in the situation. Unwanted add-ons to your relationship with Tate. Silence descended as their words sunk in. Then I began to laugh. I sounded hysterical, and I probably was. You guys... I couldn't stop laughing. They had felt rejected. By me. I had to get up. I staggered to my feet, then fell into the chair Claire had placed by the bed. Dane and Sam stared at me like I'd gone nuts. "Oh, come on! You two!" I took some deep breaths, forcing myself to breathe to calm the racing of my heart. This was a little too hilarious. "What's funny, Celeste?" Sam asked, his tone bordering on annoyed. I forced myself to sober quickly. They were beginning to look offended again. I reached over and held each of their hands. "You two are super hot, powerful shifters. I'm just a little ugly human. Do you know how blessed I feel to have you both? To know that you want me, even a fraction of how much I want you." It still seemed totally impossible to me that these men desired me, professed to love me, and would protect me against all enemies. Sam grinned, and Dane's smile was so beautiful I took a mental picture to capture for all time. "So I'm going to the bathroom to see if these cramps mean what I think they mean, and then can you please take me home?" The men nodded, their concerned faces making my heart sing. This baby may have been the only reason I escaped the bears, so maybe it was fated on more than one level. Chapter 9. Celeste. In the end, the cramps subsided, and an ultrasound proved that the baby was healthy and strong. Just one little baby was inside me. Claire was adamant that it was all the that had caused the cramping. So, the men didn't touch me. For weeks. Until I practically pounced on them and they had to make love to me. But boy, were they gentle. Too gentle. The weeks wore on and I grew bigger and bigger. My one baby made my appetite skyrocket and my belly protruded through all the new clothes the boys had bought for me. But despite the early fear of miscarriage and the fact that they were all too nervous to touch me in a way, we fell into a beautiful rhythm of sleeping together all night, then I'd wake to one of them bringing me breakfast before they headed off to work. I'd clean the house if I felt up to it, and bake for them. They'd come home at lunchtime to check on me, and Claire and Nevaeh were frequent visitors. I'd never had female friends before, and it was a lovely addition to my life. Especially all the mothers-in-law. 3 of them. All pleased as punch to have a grandchild on the way. And the best part of all, we hadn't heard a thing from the bears. They hadn't found me. I was finally beginning to feel safe. Or at least, I wanted to think I now felt safe, but when the door opened one lunchtime and my heart leapt with stress, as it always did, I realized I had a way to go in that regard. Too many years of watching and waiting for a flying fist still had me jumpy. As Tate walked into the house, full of smiles and laughter, I let the anxiety go down a notch. It was taking longer than I thought it would to feel safe and normal. According to Claire, my version of normal, a Cinderella type slaving away under a whole bunch of abusive bears, was not normal. A part of me just knew that this beautiful dream I was currently living in would shatter sooner or later. That these lovely, kind wolves would come to their senses and realize I wasn't worth loving or keeping. But for now... "How's my beautiful sweetheart?" Tate asked, as he picked me up and gently twirled me around. When he put me down, his hand cupped my belly and stroked our baby with a possessive air. "Have you eaten lunch?" I shook my head. "No, I've been waiting for you. There's tuna pasta in the oven if you're hungry, or I can just make some sandwiches." "If you've cooked a hot lunch already, that would be great." Sam and Dane came through the front door as I was serving Tate the pasta. I got kisses and cuddles from both of them, and the love surrounded me. I so wanted to accept that this new reality was one that would last. My men sat at the table and ate, talking about their work and the food I'd made for them. "This is so good, sweetheart," Tate said as he finished his second bowl. "Thank you." I sat and picked at my food. "You okay, beautiful?" Sam asked. "Yes. It's funny, no one ever said thank you to me for cooking for them before. And you guys thank me all the time. I can't quite get my head around it." Dane jumped up from the table and moved behind me to put his arms around my waist, or what was left of it. "Oh, beautiful, you deserve compliments for everything you do. The house looks amazing, the food's brilliant, but it's you we come home for. You know the pizza place delivers, right?" I laughed as he rubbed my belly in soothing circles, and my pussy pulsed in response. I swallowed down the moan. I'd been holding on to my desires for months, and I wasn't sure I could keep being the quiet little girl they'd been wrapping in cotton wool for too much longer. "Are you going back to work, or—" Tate was a builder, and both Dane and Sam were bricklayers. That explained the solid house and the incredible facade of our home. Tate stood up and cleared the table, then arranged everything in the new dishwasher they'd installed for me. Such luxuries. I was too spoilt already. Tate replied with, "We could go either way. Back to work or not. Do you need us to do something for you?" I licked my lips. I most certainly did. But could I convince them to stop treating me like I was made of glass? Since the miscarriage scare, they'd all been too nice to me. I needed to be taken. I wanted to feel the desire that had built on that first day with the three of them. The passion and lust and need. Claire, who was even more pregnant than I was, reassured me that it was completely safe for them to, how had she phrased it, bang me into next week. Heat crept up my neck and into my cheeks. I wasn't sure I could use that phrase here in front of the boys. Sam grinned at me. "What you thinking, gorgeous? You look like you're blushing." I took a breath and forced myself to get it over and done with. Surely they wouldn't reject me. "I'd like to go to bed, please." "Bed, as in you're tired?" "Would you like me to carry you up?" Sam asked, standing quickly. I almost laughed. Almost. But then frustration took over. Did I have to strip naked and do a dance to get them to notice my other needs? How were they so blind? "No, I want you all to make love to me." Tate growled with the sexy alpha noise that was uniquely his and scooped me up into his arms. "Well, that we can do." Chapter 11. Tate. The weeks went by, and our beautiful mate grew bigger and bigger. Claire said the baby would arrive in a few short weeks, and although we were excited, we were on tenterhooks waiting for the arrival. Every day one of us would stay home from work, and if we had no choice but to be away, one of our mums would stay with our waddling, grumpy girl. She was done, according to her. Done with being pregnant, and with being fat. We loved her being so big, but only being a hair over 5 feet tall, it was obvious how uncomfortable she was. There was a knock at the door. I left Sam with Celeste to answer it. "Oh, hey, Gray. How are you doing?" Another great thing about us finding our human mate was the closeness we'd developed between our pack and Grayson's. Dexter's pack, too. Having our women had brought us all together. "I'm good. We're all good. Hey, Celeste. How are you doing?" He waved from the front door, and Celeste waved back. "I'm okay, Grayson. Looking forward to getting this baby out." He chuckled. "Yeah, Claire is too." Grayson dropped his voice. Can you come outside? I need to fill you in on something. Sounded serious. Yeah, of course. I stepped outside and shut the door. What's up? The bears are on the hunt. We've had sightings and their scent is everywhere. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. They were looking for Celeste. Are you sure? Yes. I've gone out myself to check. They've surrounded the pack. The smell of them is everywhere. I suppressed my shudder. My mate. My baby. Do you think this is because of Celeste? Do you think they've seen her? Tracked her here? Grayson shrugged. Don't know, and it doesn't really matter. They've been coming for us since the moment Claire was found. Grayson's jaw clenched and tightened. And they hid Nevaeh from us for years. I nodded. I told the elders what Celeste had told me when she first came to the pack. That the bears believe we're meant to die off. And that fate wants us to be the last of the wolf shifters. Which was totally fucked, but what could we do about it? Grayson crossed his arms over his chest. Yeah, we've been talking about that. So, would the bears attack again to grab our women? Even though they knew the humans were our fated mates? Will they try to grab them now they're pregnant? Or will they attack the whole town? Tension tightened in my shoulders, and I rolled my neck. If that happened, a lot of people would die. They've got an extra generation of female shifters, not to mention more numbers in total. We have our mothers who would want to fight, of course. I grimaced. Grayson continued. There would be chaos. Our fathers would be split between protecting their mates and fighting for the pack. It would be a complete and utter clusterfuck. I ran my hand through my hair. We can't let that happen, Gray. I know. But what do we do? I crossed my arms over my chest. I had an idea, but how the hell did we mediate it? If we could put together a meeting, alpha to alpha, between the bears and us, maybe we could establish some rules, a fair fight, something. Grayson nodded. Yeah, that's an option. Otherwise, we're going to have to go on the offensive and take a hunting party to their den. We can't just sit here and wait for them to attack. We're too vulnerable. The way we have the town set up, it's beautiful, but a whole pack or two could go down, and the rest of the pack at large wouldn't even know. Fuck. He was right. I'd have to ask Celeste for help with this plan. I agree. Maybe I can... Shit, I didn't want to have to do this. Grayson knew what I was going to say. Maybe you can ask your mate for some help. She'd know the layout of their den. Maybe ask them about the structure of their day. Weaknesses. Anything that could help us. I groaned. Deep down, I'd known it would come to this. After the bears had attacked Dexter's pack, then Grayson's. They wouldn't stop until one of our shifter families was dead. And it wasn't going to be us. I'll ask her. I didn't want to put Celeste under this sort of pressure, feeling like she has to betray her own family. But I will. I'd known we'd need Celeste's help, but I hadn't wanted to ask her. After everything she'd been through, this was additional stress she just didn't need, especially at this time during her pregnancy. I'll speak to her and get back to you. I patted Gray on the shoulder and walked back inside my home. Celeste was up and making some dinner for us all. Can we help you, sweetheart? I asked, glaring at Sam. He knew she was meant to be resting. My beta glared right back. Don't look at me like that. I tried. Celeste grunted. Yep, grunted from the kitchen. I'm not helpless, Tate. I know I look like a beached whale, but I've got 4 weeks to go, so I've got to keep moving or I'll go crazy. So, spaghetti for dinner? She didn't sound like she was asking, and an annoyed vibe was radiating from her now. Sure, sweetheart. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions while you're doing that? She looked toward me while she pulled out the pasta and put some water on to boil. Yeah, of course. Sit. Is this something to do with what Grayson came over to discuss with you? She wasn't slow, this one. Yes. The pack has noticed the scent of bear shifters around town, and we were hoping you could tell us more about the den where you lived. I kept my voice as soft as possible, but I saw the way my once steady girl began to shake. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe here with us. I promise. She dried her hands with a towel. Yes, of course. I know that. It's just, well, the thought of them so near. Even if they were just passing by or maybe scouting around for info. She shuddered. What do you want to know? Things like numbers within the den. How many do you think would fight if they all attacked at once? I knew it was a hard question to start with, but it was what I most needed to know. What gave us the most concern. Celeste bit her lip and leaned against the island bench. Okay, let me think. 45 apartments times 5 at least. I didn't know what she was calculating, but I trusted what she was doing in her head. She caught my eye and continued. There's at least 250 bear shifters in that den. Say what? I couldn't believe it. That was twice as many as we had anticipated. Not all of them would fight if they attacked here. There are children and lots of elderly too. But I'd say at least 100 of strong fighting age. All shifters. Male and female. Whoa. Now I was surprised they hadn't attacked already. Celeste smiled at me. You're wondering why they haven't wiped you guys out already, aren't you? I nodded. Was I that obvious? She began to move around the kitchen, getting things out to make a tomato-based pasta sauce. She grinned like she already knew the answer. It's because they're lazy and unorganized, not to mention unfit. To get all of them to attack at one time would be way above their capabilities. So we have the advantage then? She nodded thoughtfully. Yes. But what for? You're not thinking of attacking first, are you? I honestly don't know, sweetheart, but we can't wait. We're sitting ducks. We had to improve the security, set up an alarm system. Something. We were under attack, or we soon would be. Celeste came around the bench and slid her hands around my neck. Please be careful, Tate. You know you're the anchor of this family. We'd all die without you. I chuckled as I ran my hand over the swollen belly that housed my child. Sweetheart, I have more to live for now than I have ever had in my life. But I also had more to protect. More to lose than I'd ever had before. I kissed Celeste and excused myself. I needed to talk to Dex or one of the elders. I had to give them the information I had and perhaps set up a meeting for them to talk more with Celeste. They'd have more questions, and I was sure she could answer them. I was stepping out the front door when suddenly Dexter arrived, dragging a bleeding Omega with him. Dex, speak of the devil, I was just coming to find you. Who have you got here? I didn't like to step into another man's pack and tell him how to do his job, but this Omega needed some protection, obviously. But it wasn't Dexter's Omega, so whose was he? We found out who the mole was, Dex spat, as he threw the Omega at my feet. I helped the guy up, but he could only stand on one leg. His left eye was swollen shut, and his shoulder looked oddly shaped. It had clearly been dislocated. The man must be in enormous pain. What do you mean? I asked Dex. Mole, We had a mole in our pack. Dex nodded at the bleeding guy.
I mean, we knew there was someone feeding information to the bears. It was the only thing that made sense. How else could they have attacked within a day of us bringing Claire home? Now we know they've been scouting for more information.
I turned on the Omega, who'd obviously been beaten to reveal the information.
Is this true?
He ducked his head.
Yes, Alpha. But why? Why would you betray us?
He lifted his gaze, and deep in the darkness of his eyes, I saw true hatred. Hatred for us. For his own kind. It disgusted me.
Because I could. Because they paid me. Why wouldn't I?
He stuck his chin out in defiance I'd never seen in a pack member, particularly an Omega. I was tempted to punch him right in the face, to wipe that look off his mouth. But he'd taken as much beating as he could, and I was not the kind of Alpha to beat an Omega half to death.
What the hell do you mean? You betrayed us. You could have gotten Claire or any of the others killed.
He shrugged and looked away.
What do I care? I'll never have a mate like you guys have. I don't even have a triad pack.
He tossed his hair and glared at me with his one remaining good eye.
And thanks to me, you guys probably never will either, once they get here.
I grabbed his bad arm and he cried out in pain. I didn't let go.
Tell me their plan. Now.
There was movement behind us as my pack surrounded us, but I didn't take my eyes off the Omega.
Tell me.
I squeezed his arm a little harder. What was a little pain compared to what the bears would bring our way?
They're going to,
He swallowed hard, his eyes closing, probably from the pain. Tate, you're hurting him. Celeste drew close to me, and the Omega looked at her, his one good eye bulging when he saw how pregnant she was. I took advantage of that moment.
Is that what you want, Omega? To have Celeste captured? Killed? Because you know that's what's going to happen when the bears arrive.
The bears? They're coming? I thought they were just, I don't know, scouting around a bit. Celeste gasped and shrunk back. I couldn't look at my mate to reassure her, because my wolf teeth were bared and I couldn't retract them. I didn't want to scare her even more.
Omega, you're going to call the bears and set up a meeting with them. I want to work out what the fuck is going on, and you're going to help me.
The Omega, bless his courageous heart, actually threatened me.
Or what?
I laughed and gripped tighter to his shoulder. He wanted to know what I'd do to protect my pack. I pulled his dislocated arm down and twisted until he was kneeling on the dirt, screaming at me to stop. I let go, a little.
Or I'll rip you apart, piece by piece, I swear it. On the life of my unborn child, Omega. You have no idea what I'd do to keep them both safe.
The Omega nodded, and I let him go.
Okay, I'll call them.
And he did. The meeting was set. We just had to work out what they wanted more than our extinction and figure out how to give it to them. Chapter 12. Tate. I convinced my pack to go to bed, to stay safe, while Grey, Dex and I went into the forest to talk to the Alpha of the bear's den. We didn't have much of a plan, other than to broker a truce. Somehow.
If Trevor actually turns up, guys, I swear I'll kill him, Grayson said,
as we walked up the road and into the clearing where we'd organised to meet. Not too far from the pack if we needed backup.
You keep your feelings to yourself, Grey, Dex threatened. We need this to be as impersonal as possible.
Grayson snorted. I had to laugh.
Impersonal, Dex? Then you should have sent some of the elders to this meeting. It doesn't get much more personal than this for me, you and Grey."
The others grunted in agreement.
Dex nodded. "So we stick to the plan and hope to God they haven't brought an army with them."
Grayson said,
"If they have, we shift and run. We won't stand a chance of winning out here against 100 bear shifters."
Dex said,
"My pack's on standby, and so is the rest of the town."
We trudged forward, and I glanced behind me again. I had the strangest feeling we were being followed, but every time I looked behind us, I saw nothing. My heart, which was already beating too hard, began to bang against my ribs.
"Do you smell that?"
The scent of bear was on the breeze, and it suddenly became too strong to stand. A stench. Why did they never bathe or clean themselves? Disgusting creatures. I forced myself not to cover my nose, so they didn't see my revulsion if they were around. And then they were there, in front of us. 5 of them, all big brutes. But at least they were in human form, for now. I'd half expected them to bring bodyguards in the shape of their bear shifter forms.
"I see you brought backup,"
Dex called out. The agreement had been for 3 only.
"Well, you can never trust a wolf to keep his word,"
the big guy in the middle said, then laughed at his own joke. I heard Grayson's low growl and stepped closer to him, but didn't say anything. I didn't know if everyone could keep their cool at this meeting, but doing so was the best chance we had to avoid outright war.
"We kept our word, Trevor. There's 3 of us. And we're here. How about we get down to business?"
Trevor narrowed his gaze at me.
"And what business is that, wolf? I'm Tate. I know who you are. You're the guy who knocked up Celeste."
The bears around Trevor growled all of a sudden, the mood within the group changing. The anger ramped up a notch, and my wolf threatened to rise up in response. I took a slow, deep breath. I needed to play this carefully. Cards close to my chest. They couldn't know how important Celeste was to me, or we'd all be lost. Brains over heart in this case.
"Yeah, that's me. How do you know?" "I can smell her on you, even now. That stench we all had to put up with for years. Ugh."
He shuddered as though my mate repulsed him, and the wolf inside of me howled. But I pushed him down. I needed to show Grayson and Dexter how to stay calm, even when the bears baited us.
"Back to the business at hand, Trevor. We know you guys have some sort of plan to attack the pack, and we need to come to an agreement before that happens."
There was a beat of silence. Yes, that confirmed it.
"Why would I want to do that?" Trevor asked.
I could see his point, but no matter how they played their attack, they'd lose numbers on their side too.
"Because there's no fight between us. We've done nothing to you, you've done nothing to us. There's no reason we need to fight at all."
And as far as I knew, that was true. Even the elders couldn't understand why the bears wanted a war with us.
Trevor grunted. "My father believed that you wolf shifters were meant to die out, become extinct."
I'd heard this from Celeste and was ready for this argument.
"But fate found a way around it and sent us human mates. Doesn't that say something? That we're not meant to die off?"
Trevor grimaced, and I saw a small amount of reasoning come to life in his eyes.
"There are a lot of people who believe what my father believed, that you all should be left to rot. And after Celeste betrayed us, then ran off, my den wants revenge. They want to attack."
I paused. He didn't want this. Nevaeh had told me once that Trevor's father had forced him to date her. Surely he'd want to just walk away. And I could work with that.
I smiled calmly. But if you don't want to risk your den by attacking us, surely you, as the Alpha, must be followed. Trevor was nodding, and I could almost hear the cogs in his brain clicking around. I may be able to hold them off until a treaty can be organised, but you need to give us something in return. Anything. What do you want? Supplies? Cash? We want Celeste back. Cold dread skittled down my spine. I had expected that, but hearing it out loud made the threat against my mate seem more real. Why? I already knew. They wanted to punish her. I could tell. Trevor looked amongst his den mates, puffing up his chest like a... She was sentenced to death by me, and the sentence must be carried out. It'll be the only way to appease my den, maintain order. A sacrifice for the greater good. Surely you'd do that. I didn't move or speak. I couldn't. And the Alphas alongside me weren't helping. They knew my struggle and would never sacrifice their own mates for the good of the overall pack. You want me to send her back to you so you can kill her? I had to repeat his words back to him just so I was 100% sure what he was saying. And I had to hold my temper. Dexter and Grayson and I had sworn to each other not to show our cards. Not to declare the importance of our fated mates in our lives, as Celeste had confirmed that the bears didn't have such mates. And he showed me she'd been correct when he said, "You can get another mate. Women are interchangeable." I nodded and cleared my throat, working out what to say. I had to buy us some time to work out a new plan. Because I was never giving her up. I would die first. I agree. Women are interchangeable. The lie tasted like ash on my tongue. Dexter turned to me and shook his head in the smallest of gestures, but I focused on Trevor, a plan forming in my mind. You know our pack is childless, womanless. Yes. He grinned and exchanged satisfied looks with his den mates. I wanted to squash their arrogance with my fist. But I pushed down my anger. Then give me 4 more weeks. After that, I'll hand Celeste over to you, and you can do with her as you will. There was the faintest gasp, a whisper on the wind that tugged at my attention, but I couldn't focus on it. This was too important. I had to buy us time so I could save our pack. What will 4 weeks change? Trevor asked. I told you, our pack is childless, and she's pregnant with my baby. Let me get my kid from her first. It's only a few short weeks away, then you can have her. Oh my God, my heart actually hurt to say the words. Never. You'll surrender her to me. Like hell I will. Of course, once I've got my baby, you can have the human. My wolf screamed inside my mind. Howled like a crazy at the moon. But I wasn't stopping this line of argument. Not now that I'd started along this path. It gave us time, and it showed the pack how crazy the bears truly were. Okay, then we can talk about a treaty. My father is gone, and honestly, I just want to get on with our lives. Though, I've seen your houses, and I want one like that. We don't have what you do. That's because you're fucking lazy. We're all tradesmen. We can help you with everything. Let me go back to the elders to work out a deal. Like hell we'll work for free for these guys. Fine, Wolf. You get your 4 weeks. Then we're coming for the little... I nodded as if I agreed with his statement, though I wanted to reach out and close my hand around his neck. Squeeze hard until the life left him and he fell to the ground at my feet. How dare they threaten my mate? My true love. I swallowed rage, and then we retreated. We had to get back to the pack.
The smell on the breeze as we turned away from the bears was strangely familiar. What was it?
"What the f*** was that?"
Dex spat at me, finally speaking. My wolf was practically bursting through my skin.
"Calm your farm, Dex."
I began to strip, and so did the other two, the energy between us burning angry and bright. No way could I stay in human form with this much adrenaline rushing through me.
"I bought us time. Nothing else. Those bears are gonna die."
My wolf ripped through my body, my human side unable to stay in control with the rage that filled me boiling through my blood. We ran back to the pack as quickly as we could, around the forest that protected our families. There didn't seem like a way around this war now. We'd have to fight. Because there was no way they were ever getting my mate. Chapter 13. Celeste. Bile rose in my throat, and I choked on it. Tate wanted to hand me over to the bears. I couldn't let them hear me. I couldn't. So I swallowed the acid and the tears. I had to get out of here. I crept away and began to run, stumbling over tree roots, long grass, and thick shrubs. My belly was so cumbersome, but I carried myself the best I could as I cut across the forest. Away from the bears, and more importantly, away from the pack I had thought was my family. They were going to kill me. The bears for honor, and the pack to save their own hides. What had I done to deserve all this? Be born human. The tears ran uncontrollably down my face as my baby rolled and kicked within my womb. It was as if the child sensed its mother's anguish. I had to get away from here. Those wolves were not going to take my baby from me. And they were certainly not going to send me back to the den for my punishment. Anger pushed me harder. I ran, tripping and stumbling, through the forest. But I didn't stop, though the cold ate at my skin and the pain in my heart made me want to cry. I have no idea how long I ran. My legs trembled and my whole body shivered with fear and the pain of rejection. I turned back my head to look over my shoulder. Had any of them heard me when I inadvertently let out that gasp? What if they'd heard me? I faced the front again and took another step forward, and then I was falling, slipping down a hill I hadn't noticed. And the world went black. Sam. I woke to a cold hand on my shoulder, shaking me awake. It was Tate, and by the look of him, he'd only just returned from a run.
"Hey, where's Celeste?"
Tate said. There was an urgency to his voice that had me sitting up. I glanced to the other side of the bed, where I'd left her. She was always surrounded by pillows these days, and didn't like us getting too close in sleep. She got too hot and her back hurt, so we had temporarily given her some space. But the place that should have housed my mate was empty.
"I don't know. Where's Dane? Maybe she's with him."
But as I said the words, cold fear spread through my gut. That tone of Tate's had not been conducive to low stress.
"What's wrong?" "She's gone. I can't find her. Dane's getting dressed. Get up. Get some clothes on."
I pulled on some jeans and a sweatshirt as quickly as I could, though it was pointless. I could feel my wolf stir, and Tate's speech was a little garbled as he struggled to talk through his shifter teeth. Our clothes would be shredded soon if the mood continued like this.
"What's going on, Tate?"
I followed him down the stairs, and Dane met us in the living room. "Where's Celeste?" Dane asked. My brain was empty, free of all thoughts as my shock rammed into me.
"She's 8 months pregnant. Where the hell could she have gone?"
The front door opened and Dexter walked in.
"She's not at my place, and Claire hasn't seen her."
Tate's fingers tightened into fists.
"I knew it. I felt her. I even caught her beautiful scent, but I thought I was imagining it. This is all my fault. I grabbed my alpha's arm and shook him. What the hell are you talking about? He sighed heavily, running his hands through his hair. I think Celeste followed me into the woods tonight. Why would she do that? Tate shrugged. Maybe she was worried about us. Maybe she wanted to help. I have no idea, but I heard a few noises as we walked into the forest and thought we may have been followed. But I dismissed the idea, because who would be that stupid? Good point, but dear God, she could be anywhere. I groaned. Okay, fine. Where is she? We need to find her. Tate grimaced. We do. But you need to know something before we go. If she heard what I said to the bears, then she'll be running away from us. But why would she do that? I grabbed him by the shirt. What did you say? I could barely talk now. My teeth were shifting, and my eyes had flashed to Wolf's night vision. I could only see in black and white, though a red haze was covering me. Tate sighed, not looking at me. I told the bears they could have her once the baby was born. I pulled back my arm and punched my alpha as hard as I could. Pain cracked through my wrist as Tate reeled back, blood dripping from his nose. If something's happened to her or that baby, Tate, I panted, and began to strip. She was in danger. I could feel it. And it was all his fault. I let my wolf tear through me. My black beta wolf that was almost as big as my alpha. Today, I would take him down if I needed to. I ran straight out the door and put my nose into the air. Blood. My mate's blood. Oh, no. I began to run, the other wolves behind me. They were on my tail, but I ran faster. How could he do this to us? To her, after everything she'd been through. I pushed down my anger, the feelings consuming me and making me want to turn around and fight my own pack. But my mate needed me. That was more important now. I'd deal with the guilt later. The scent of her sweetness, her blood, made me turn off the road and into the forest. She'd come this way. I could smell her, frightened and bleeding. I skittered all the way to the edge of a cliff and looked down. All my nightmares came true in that one moment when I stared down to the bottom of the cliff. Celeste's broken body lay in a tangle of brush. Her blonde hair was strewn over a fallen tree branch. I threw back my head and howled, alerting my brothers to the pain I was in and letting loose the raging feelings bottling up in my head. Then I ran, making my way down the cliff as fast as I could, slipping and sliding on the loose dirt, the rocks cutting my paws. Oh my God, she's dead. She's dead. The baby, please no. I hit the ground and put my nose against my mate, my heart pounding in my chest as I checked to see if she was alive. If I felt her dead, cold skin against my nose, I didn't know what I'd do. Kill Tate would likely be first on the list. But she moved. She moaned. She rolled her head, and I let go of my wolf so fast my human skin hurt as it stretched back to fit me. My head spun with the speed of my shift, but I put my fingers to her neck, feeling a pulse. I looked up, where my pack and Dexter's wolves stood on top of the cliff. I called out to them. She's alive. You need to get Claire. And an ambulance. Dexter and his pack took off, and Tate howled. I knew he wanted to come down also, but I didn't want to deal with the Alpha at this moment. Find a safe way down for Claire. I squatted next to my mate, wishing for blankets and towels and an airlift. I cradled her face gently,
careful not to disturb her neck. She could have broken anything, or everything. Then her eyes opened slowly, and she began to cry. "Sam, the baby's coming. I'm bleeding." I looked down and realized there was blood over her jeans. A lot of it. That's what I'd smelt. That's how I'd found her. How horrific. I'd tracked my mate because she was bleeding out. I cupped her face. "Just hold on, Celeste. Hold on. Help's coming." She tried to sit up, but I pushed her shoulders gently. "No. Please don't get up, beautiful." "Tate, he's going to send me away. The baby." I let loose a growl I'd never made. "He will never send you away. Do you understand me? I'll kill that burst. You will live with us and give us more babies forever. Do you understand me?" I was crying now, and I couldn't stop. "Celeste! Celeste!" She closed her eyes, and she wasn't waking up this time. Oh my God, what do I do? There was noise above and around me. I wanted to drag my mate close and hold her. But I was too scared to damage her and knew that I couldn't do anything. I just stood next to her almost lifeless body, doing nothing, feeling useless. "Help me! Please!" Claire was suddenly there next to me with a bag and blankets. "Move out of the way, Sam. The paramedics are on the way." Claire checked Celeste's pulse and the baby's heartbeat with a stethoscope. "They're both alive." "But the blood." I gestured to the blood staining Celeste's thighs. "Surely the baby can't survive this." "Cover her up. Quick. Keep her warm." I followed Claire's orders. "Claire, tell me, what are her chances of surviving this?" Claire's face was grim, her lips twisted as she considered how to answer me. "I don't know what her injuries are. If she's fractured her spine or has massive internal bleeding, she'll be in for a big struggle." "And the baby?" "The bleeding is probably an indication of a placental abruption, so the baby is still alive. But we need to get her to the hospital for a C-section as soon as possible." "How long do they have?" I asked. Claire shook her head. "I don't know, Sam. I honestly don't know. But we need to get her to hospital. Now." I could hear sirens. I didn't know how much time had passed, but Celeste was getting paler by the minute. Claire glanced behind her. "Oh, thank God, they're here. Tate's going to bring them down, but we may need to help them through the brush. This isn't an easy spot to get to." I growled loudly. "You get Tate away from her, or I'll kill him. This is all his fault." "Sam." "Claire, I'm serious." "Fine. I'll go get the paramedics." Claire disappeared, and someone called out to me. I looked up, and Dane was throwing down a pair of rolled-up jeans. They snagged on a tree, then fell down in the dirt. I hadn't even considered my own nakedness. I grabbed them and pulled them on. That would have been fun to explain to the humans, why I was naked and in the middle of a forest with an unconscious woman. It was going to be hard enough as it was. "Here she is!" 2 men with a stretcher hurried over, and Claire pulled me out of the way. "She's 36 weeks pregnant and bleeding. We'll need to prep the OR for an emergency C-section as soon as we get back." The men tied Celeste to the white stretcher and carried her off to an ambulance. "I'll ride with her," Claire said to me. "Get your car and drive to the hospital. I'll meet you there." I nodded. I didn't want to let Claire take her, but there was nothing more I could do. And there was no extra room in the back of that tiny ambulance with her. I could see that. So I trusted Dexter's mate to take care of Celeste. I had to, because my own pack had sure as shut her down. As the ambulance drove off, I was left with a sinking, horrible feeling, one of pure grief and despair. I'd never recover from this if Celeste and her baby died. Tate was suddenly next to me, and I was no longer alone with my feelings. Instead, my need to hurt him was pure and nasty, and bigger than me. I looked at him and spat. "If she dies, you're dead." Tate nodded. "I know. Because I won't be able to live without her." His grief came at me in a wave. I couldn't handle it. What he carried was too much for me now. Grief and regret. "No." I let go of my human self and shifted back to my wolf, and I started running home. I needed my clothes. I needed my car, and I needed my mate. Our baby's life hung in the balance, and my family was in tatters. Chapter 14. Celeste. Waking up was harder than it had ever been. What was wrong with my eyes? My arms? My body? I licked my lips and swallowed the cotton wool feeling in my mouth. "Celeste. Hello?" I knew that voice. It was Dane, I was sure of it. I blinked and blinked and blinked until my eyes finally opened. Bright lights shone down on me. Where am I? Dane was there, gripping my hand. "You're at the hospital." Hospital? Why would I be at the hospital? I reached for my belly with my free hand, and the baby swelling was gone. My eyes popped open, and I looked down on my now flat-ish stomach. "The baby! My baby!" My voice rose, almost hysterical. "Where is it?" Dane cupped my face and forced me to look at him. "She's out, and she's doing well. A little premature, and on oxygen in the ICU for a few more days, but she's strong. Just like her mama." Tears pricked my eyes, and I struggled to sit up. Dane picked up a control and pushed a button. The bed lifted me up until I was almost sitting. I winced as pain shot through my ribs, and I let my head rest back against the pillows. I had a girl. I'd always wanted a girl. Of course, I would have been happy with a boy, with twins. A puppy, even. But a baby girl was the true fantasy. Yes, you did, my love. And she's beautiful. Sam's watching over her as we speak. What happened? I didn't remember much at all. Why am I here? Dane pulled up a chair and sat next to me, gripping my hand like he'd never let go. "You ran away into the forest and fell down a cliff embankment. We thought we were going to lose you both, but you were very lucky. You've got a cracked rib or two and some cuts and bruising, but considering how far you fell, we're all thanking our lucky stars that you got away from it so unscathed." Cracked ribs? I looked down at my hand where a drip was inserted, probably with some very good painkillers too. Why would I run away from you all? Then the memories came flooding back, and I gasped, pulling my hand from Dane's grip. "You're going to give me to the bears! You don't even want me!" I began to scream. "Help! Somebody help me!" Dane grabbed for my hands again. I pushed at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. "No! Get away from me! I want my baby! Give me my baby!" 2 nurses and Claire came rushing in. "Celeste, calm down. Please." I grabbed for Claire's arm and held her tight. "They're going to send me back to the bears! You need to protect me, please! My baby! I need my baby! They're going to steal her from me!" Claire grabbed my hands and squeezed hard. "Celeste, listen to me, okay? Listen. No one is taking your baby away. She's in a crib in the NICU, I can bring her to you, but you can't hold her yet, okay?" I nodded, but couldn't stop shaking. Claire tried to move away, but I grabbed her arm tighter. "Claire, you can't leave. Tate said he was going to hand me over to the bears once the baby came. If she's here, then he'll throw me away." My throat closed up as the betrayal truly hit home. After giving myself entirely over to them, they were going to get rid of me. After I'd finally let down my guard, let myself believe that they loved me. A sob rose, and I couldn't hold it in. Claire grabbed for me again. "I'm not going anywhere until we figure all this out, okay? Nurse Myers, could you bring Celeste's baby to us, please?" I watched the woman go and relaxed a fraction. But I wasn't letting Claire's hand go. No way. Dane was still in the room, and I shot him a glare before looking back at the doctor. "They're going to kill me." I'd known it was all too good to be true. The wolves had been waiting for me to grow them a baby, and then they were done with me. The nurse came back into the room, wheeling a clear-sided box with a baby inside. She was barely dressed, and so beautiful my heart broke in half, only to fill up with a love I'd never known existed. "Oh, my God!" I let go of Claire's hands and reached for the box. "She'll be cold like that, won't she?" The baby turned toward my voice and blinked up at me with huge blue eyes. Oh, my God. She's here. "Hello, baby. I'm your mama. I can't believe I missed your birth." I looked at Claire. "How many days has it been?" Claire came close and smiled. "She's not cold, don't worry. These humidicribs are kept at a constant 97 degrees, so she's nice and warm. And she was born only 24 hours ago. You haven't missed much at all, Mama." Claire glanced at the door, but I didn't want to take my eyes off my baby. "Now you can touch her through these special little sleeves." Claire opened up an access point for me. I placed my hand inside and reached for my baby. I touched her soft skin on her arm and her tiny little hand. Her fingers wrapped around my finger, and I began to cry, tears slipping down my cheeks. "How long will she need to stay in here, Claire?" I'd been 4 weeks from my due date. How dangerous was that for my baby girl? "Just a few more days, I think, Celeste. We'll reassess her each day. Now I'm going to leave her here with you, and I'm going to deal with something in the corridor. Just yell if you need me." "Okay." I was never going to need anything else, ever again. I had my little angel. She'd survived that horrible fall. We both had. And now I had to work out a way to survive the next 50 years of my life, because there was no way I was letting the wolves use me as a sacrifice now. Tate. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Celeste woke up. A single day had passed since that nightmare of her falling down the cliff. Sam still wouldn't talk to me, and Dane moped around like a puppy with a broken tail. Our family was falling apart, and somehow I knew it was all my fault. Then the door to her hospital room flew open, and an angry doctor came at us. "What the hell is she talking about?" Claire hissed at us. My fears had come true, and poor Celeste had remembered immediately why she'd run from us. I sighed. "It's my fault, Claire. Ask Dexter about it. He was there. He'll explain everything." Claire narrowed her eyes and poked me in the chest with her pointed finger. "You are going to tell me right now what the hell is going on. What was that girl doing at the bottom of a cliff in the middle of the night?" Claire was practically panting, she was so angry. I let my shoulders drop, the weight of my guilt too heavy to bear. "When Grayson, Dexter and I met with the bears, they told us an attack was imminent,
and from what Celeste had told me about their numbers, I knew that much of our town would die if it came to war. So I asked them for a treaty, a way to buy us some time to work out a full solution.
Claire put her hands on her hips. Okay. So what did you offer them? I glanced over at Dane, who met my look and then grimaced. I turned back to the doctor who'd saved my child's life. They wanted Celeste, so they could carry out the death sentence they'd imposed on her 6 months ago. Her mouth dropped open. You didn't say yes! I ran a hand through my hair and tugged at my shirt. I had no choice. It was the only thing I could say to put them off attacking. I told them to give me a month, until the baby was born, and then I'd send her back to them. Claire glared at me with the fury of 1,000 suns. Tell me you're joking! Why didn't anyone understand that I'd been lying through my teeth? As if I'd ever give up my mate. The one person who completed me. I would never have done it, ever. You weren't there, ask Dexter. I was in an impossible situation, so I lied. It was just to buy us some time so we could come up with a plan. Claire rolled her eyes in a dramatic fashion. Oh, my God. Please tell me she didn't hear you lying to the bears. Dane nodded. She did, we think, because she snuck out in the middle of the night and ran off. Nothing else makes sense. Claire sighed. She definitely heard you, because she was just telling me that you're going to send her back to the bears. Jesus, that poor girl. Claire slapped her palm against her forehead. What a mess. My chest cracked open, pain pouring into my wounds like salt. I know. What do I do, Claire? How do I explain to her that I was never going to go through with it? That I was saying it to save the pack and give us time to come up with an alternative? I clenched my teeth against the wave of nausea that rolled through me. I'd been sick to my stomach every single moment since this had happened. Not only did I have to find a way to save my pack and the lives of those in our town, but my mate was hurt and no longer trusted me. More than that, she thought I was actively involved in wanting to have her killed. The walls were tumbling down around me, and I didn't know what to do. What should I do, Claire? You need to explain, apologize, and beg forgiveness. I know, and I will. But I don't want to upset her any further. Claire nodded, her phone beeping. She pulled her cell out of her pocket, then sighed. I'm going to make a phone call, then come back. You three wait out here, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Claire walked off and began talking on her cell. Sam and Dane sat in the plastic chairs in the hallway, and I loitered around, doing laps on the linoleum. When Claire came back, she had a grim look of determination on her face. Okay. Let's go. Tate, you're with me. I followed Claire into the hospital room where my mate was talking to our baby through a little incubator box. I hung by the doorway, ready for the attack. Claire moved over to her patient. Celeste, I just spoke to Dex about the other night to confirm what Tate said about his conversation with the bears. Celeste pulled her arm out of the incubator and turned to me. I inhaled sharply when I saw her face. Her anger sliced through my heart like claws through flesh. Get him out of here! I looked toward Claire, who took over. Celeste, you need to hear him out. Your whole future, and that of all the packs in the Woodlands, depends on it. That seemed to give Celeste pause, because she drooped, her shoulders sagging as she crossed her arms over her chest. Fine. Talk.
I know you heard what I said to the bears about giving you up after the baby was born. But I would never do that."
She glared at me, her face not changing a single bit. "I don't believe you." I laughed sadly.
"Well, that's ironic, because I was lying to them, not you. How could you think, after all the love we've shared over the past 6 months, that I'd ever abandon you?"
She looked away, but I could see the pain in her face. I went down on my knees to beg.
"Sweetheart, look at me, please. I lied that night. Lied my ass off. You heard me tell them that you weren't my mate, and you know that's a lie. I had to buy us more time. You told me that they outnumber us 2 to 1. My whole town will die if the bears attack as one force. I had to tell them something to give us enough time to mount a proper defense. I will never, ever give you up. Even if you and Sam and Dane vote to kick me out forever, I'll sleep on the doorstep for the rest of my life. To make sure the 3 of you remain safe. The 3 of you and the baby."
She looked at me this time, her blue eyes as dark as granite. "I know you want the baby. You don't want me." I shook my head.
"You're right about one thing, and horribly wrong about the other. Of course I want the baby. She's ours, she's yours. But I want you even more. How can I prove it to you?"
I stayed on my knees, hoping she'd see how truly sorry I was. She sighed, but her arms didn't uncross. "I don't think I'll ever forgive you for what you said that night. I'll never be able to let my guard down with you again. I'll never believe you again when you say that you love me. It's all just broken. We can't go back." Hot tears were in my eyes, then on my cheeks. I dashed them away and looked at the floor.
Okay. I understand."
I got to my feet and backed up to the door.
"I'll move my things out of the house, and you can come home with Sam and Dane. Neither of them forgives me either, so it's probably best that you 3 stay together."
I moved to walk away, and Celeste called out, "What did you mean the pack was in danger?" I turned back to face her.
"The bears want blood. Mine, yours, they don't care. They want our pack extinct, gone. So we either need to change their minds, or we need to fight them."
"Oh, so I was going to be a sacrifice for peace. How noble of you." Her tone was hard, unforgiving, and the darkness of my guilt consumed me.
"You have it all wrong, sweetheart, as Dexter and Grayson can attest. I lied to the bears to give us a few weeks to plan. Nothing more. I'd rather die than ever see you hurt."
She didn't answer me, only turned back to face her baby once again. There was only one way forward, and that was to eliminate the bears once and for all.
"I love you, Celeste. With all my heart."
She didn't look my way again, but it didn't matter. I was able to say the only words I wanted her to hear. Then I left. I left the hospital, and I left my pack. The bears wanted blood, so I'd give it to them. Chapter 15. Sam. I watched my alpha walk out of the hospital, and for some reason I had the most horrible suspicion I'd never see him again. "I think we need to go speak to Celeste now." I stood up and walked into the hospital room with Dane. Then I stopped. My heart filled. I couldn't believe how beautiful she was, sitting there with our baby within arm's reach. Celeste. I went straight to her hospital bed and tried to gather her into my arms.
"You're awake. Please never leave us again. We love you too much to go through that fear again."
She laughed as she put her head on my chest. Put you through it? What about me? I missed out on my daughter's birth and seemed to have toppled off a cliff. I kissed her upturned face, her button nose, her forehead, her pale pink lips. You did, and you survived it all. My perfect, brave, strong girl. I cuddled her close and sighed. This feels so good. I didn't realize how much I'd miss you until I didn't have you for a day. She laughed again and pulled away. So you weren't part of the plan to toss me away as soon as the baby was born? I frowned at her. Of course not. There's never been such a plan, and there never will be. You're our fated mate, and no one's taking you away from us. Celeste screwed up her face. That's not what I heard the other night. I grimaced. Yeah, I know. I still can't believe how stupid Tate was to try and bullshit his way through that meeting. Celeste blinked up at me. So he really was lying? Of course he was. Are you serious right now? Celeste chewed on her bottom lip. Tate said he's going to move out. I'm not sure where he'd go, but... I gaped at our mate. He what? Celeste's eyebrows rose on her forehead. I don't think it's a bad idea, actually. We don't need him, and I can't forgive him for what he did. He betrayed me. I reeled backwards, feeling like Celeste had smacked me with an open palm. Don't need him. Don't need him. He's our alpha. He's the one who holds our family together. Who will save our pack if it comes to a fight? Celeste's gaze dropped away, and she began playing with her hair, twirling it around her finger and staring at the strands. Well, you can do that too. Now I wanted to shake her. Sure, Tate had been stupid, and we all wanted to punish him for the consequences of his actions, but she didn't get it. I can, but you're not understanding the difference between an alpha and a beta. Celeste shrugged, and I began to panic. Tate looked after us, guarded us, would die for us. He was the glue that kept this family together. Look, I know what he said was dumb and foolish and resulted in us almost losing you and our baby. I haven't spoken to him since that night, and I was planning on punishing him for a while yet. But breaking up our family, that's a different thing altogether. I didn't want to lose our pack. It wouldn't function without him. I need to find him. He can do his penance another way. I ran out of the room and along the corridor. He couldn't have gotten far. I made my way outside and sniffed the air. Nope. Nothing. I jogged over to the car park and went up to level 3 where we'd parked the car. The truck was still there, and next to it was Tate's car. He hadn't taken it, so where was he? I jogged back down the stairs and went to the cafeteria. It was 5 in the morning, and no one was around, but I'd been hoping Tate had come to get a stale coffee or some food from one of the vending machines. But there was nothing. No sign of him. I walked back to Celeste's hospital room slowly, sniffing the air as I went, and not coming up with anything from my alpha. When I arrived back at the room, I took a big, careful breath, then informed my Omega and our mate that he was gone. Dane gaped at me. What do you mean he's gone? Gone where? Celeste sighed. What does it matter? Won't he be fine wherever he is? I turned on her and growled. You don't understand. Tate has lost his pack, his mate and his baby, or so he thinks. And he has a bear den who wants your blood. How do you think he's going to solve that problem? Celeste's eyes began to widen, and then her mouth dropped open. He wouldn't. She licked her lips. He wouldn't do anything stupid, would he? My heart was pounding like a runaway train.
He's going to sacrifice himself to the bears. I just know it, I said.
But how? Why?
I growled at her again, and she paled. Celeste, you aren't getting it. Tate is an alpha. He lives only for his pack. If he believes it will keep you safe, keep all of us safe, he'd sacrifice himself 100 times over. If those bears want someone's head, then he'll go serve it up on a silver platter.
Oh, fuck. What had I done? I'd been angry with Tate, so angry that he'd put Celeste's life in danger. But I never wanted this. But he can't. I mean... She swallowed hard, her eyes turning glossy from unshed tears. I groaned, feeling frustrated and impotent. Just like I had last night when Celeste's life was fading away before me. Now it was Tate whose life could end soon.
I know you're still mad at him, and you can't forgive him for lying about such an important thing, but you need to think. What if it was you? What would you do for someone you truly loved? Our daughter. What level would you stoop to? What lie would you tell? Would you die for her?
Silvery tears slipped down Celeste's cheeks. I'd do anything to keep her safe. I nodded once, feeling the strange calm of an impending battle descend over me.
Then you have your answer as to why Tate did what he did, and now why he's gone to sacrifice himself.
Celeste let out a sob, and I turned away.
I need to leave. I'm not losing Tate. Not today.
Celeste grabbed for my hand as I tried to walk away. What can I do?
I squeezed her hand. You can keep our baby safe and get better. Because you are the only thing that matters to us.
Celeste swallowed. I didn't realize he would. I cupped her face, willing some courage into her.
None of us did. But you need to remember that we grew up knowing about the fated mate bond, and you didn't. You don't understand it the way we do. It is love at first sight in every way for us. We would die for you, and our daughter. She sobbed loudly this time, more tears flowing down her cheeks.
I'd rather you lived for us.
I pressed a kiss to her lips. I'll bring him back. Dane, let's go.
We started running, and I got on the horn to Dexter and the elders. It was an hour's drive from the pack to town. 45 minutes if they broke every speed limit along the way. I prayed to God that wouldn't be too late. We needed to save our Alpha from doing something we were all going to regret. Tate. Finding the bears' headquarters was easy enough. I just followed the stench and the information that I'd accumulated from Celeste about them. She'd told me that they were on the furthest outskirts of town in a ramshackle apartment block that looked like it was barely holding itself together. I stared up at the building I'd found in my walking quest. Celeste had lived here her whole life. How had she survived? There were beer cans and cigarette butts littering the grass, and not much else around. It was still early, maybe 7 o'clock in the morning. The humans in the surrounding neighborhood had stirred. Some were on their way to work, school, or whatever else they did. But the bears didn't seem to have woken yet. I walked forward, up the path to the apartment block. Surely they'd wake up for this. An alpha wolf coming to surrender. I lifted my hand and knocked on the door. I waited for a while, then did it again. What time did these creatures rise? Or more rightly, what time did they go to bed? Eventually the door opened. A sleepy-looking woman in her 20s or 30s blinked up at me. I'm here to see your Alpha. She yawned at me. "He won't be awake for a while." Geez, you'd think this sort of thing happened every day.
"It's important. I'll wait."
"Suit yourself." She showed me inside to a living area where there was a run-down snooker table and a leather couch with a great big hole in it. "You may be waiting a while." So much for charging to my death.
"No problem."
I sat on the couch, avoiding the hole and feeling a strange buzz in my veins. A weird desire to chuckle and laugh aloud overtook me. There was no anger or regret, only warm feelings I couldn't identify. I'd once read that some people experienced a sort of euphoria before they died. This was what they must have meant. I chuckled to myself, realizing how ridiculous I sounded, even inside my own head. I waited what felt like hours, but it probably wasn't that long until a young kid stumbled into the room. He saw me and stopped short. "Who are you?" He smelled like the wrong end of a horse, and unfortunately, my wolf-like senses made me cringe.
"I'm Tate. Can you get the alpha for me?"
Okay." And he wandered off. Oh my God. Why was I so worried about an attack from these people? They were unclean, unorganized, and slept all day. But then I heard it. The rumble of the bears. The hairs on the back of my neck tingled as a dozen men stepped into the room. Trevor, their alpha, was in the center of the large group. Celeste was right about their physicality. They were soft-bodied and unshaven, and on the surface looked unfit. But they were big, and like the bears they shifted into, I knew they would be fast and strong and mean.
"What the hell are you doing here? I thought you said a month."
Oh, so they'd partied and relaxed, had they? Thinking they had time before they had to do anything with us. Maybe I should have come back with a hunting party. Every alpha and beta in our pack could have taken these guys down. But my pack didn't want me. My beta wouldn't even look at me, and my mate had rejected me. Why would I risk the lives of anyone else when a simple sacrifice was all these bears wanted? I squared my shoulders and said what I'd come to say.
"I've come to take her place."
Trevor blinked, then glanced to the men at his side, who seemed equally confused.
"What do you mean?"
"I mean exactly what I said. You want Celeste here, so you can carry out your sentence. I'm here to take her place. A peace offering to stop all the fighting." The men gaped at me.
But you're an alpha."
"You can't do that," Trevor said. One of the beefy old guys at his side said,
"This is a trap. I'm sure of it."
I wanted to laugh. Why was this so hard for them to believe? Celeste was my mate. Of course I would do anything to save her. Did they not know that?
"Look, this is a simple trade, with one condition. That you swear off attacking the wolf pack and worrying about if they have their mates or not. That was your father's agenda, wasn't it, Trevor?"
The bear shifter lifted his chin in the air.
"Yeah? So what? So you had to date Nevaeh for how long because of all that crap? You lost years when you should have just been here, in your den, with your woman."
Woman? Women? I didn't know the terminology. And although I'd love to smash Trevor's face in for what he'd done to Nevaeh in the years he'd been with her, this was a negotiation. I had to keep my cool. "We can't do that," one of the younger guys said. Trevor looked torn, so I kept talking, hoping to sway him.
"Hey, look. I'm handing myself over to you. If you want to show the den how strong you are, just destroy me. I won't fight you. That'll be enough. And you can leave the rest of the pack alone."
My brain searched for another argument. I hadn't really thought the bears would need convincing, but then it came to me.
Leave them to their human mates. The wolves will never be as strong as you when the next generation comes through. Those kids might not even be able to shift.
I had no idea if my daughter would be able to shift or not, but I didn't care. She was perfect and beautiful. But I was betting the bears would care. There was a rumble of assent. Trevor began to laugh.
That would be an even greater victory, wouldn't it? To see that pack turned into a group of humans.
He practically rolled on the ground, he was laughing so hard. And I let him. Whatever he needed to believe to keep my mate safe.
So, we're agreed. Yes, we're agreed.
That was great. But how was I going to make sure Trevor followed through with his deal?
Does anyone have a phone so I can let my elders know the deal's done? Then I'm all yours.
One of the younger kids was pushed forward, and he timidly offered me a cell. Again, strangest scene ever. I punched in the numbers for Sam's cell. He never answered his phone. His voicemail kicked in, and I cleared my throat, now strangely tight.
Sam, it's Tate. The bears have agreed to my terms and will take me in exchange for Celeste. They've also agreed to leave the pack alone, and everyone is to get on with their lives.
I hesitated to say more while the bears still listened.
So, you take care. Thanks.
I hung up, and my heart dropped, aching and bare. Trevor clapped a hand over my shoulder.
I have to say, Wolf, you've got balls. I'll give you that.
They herded me out of the room, and I went willingly.
Well, you know, anything for the family, right?
I looked at him, alpha to alpha, and expected to see some sort of camaraderie. But instead he looked away, then pushed me out the back door. Into a fenced-in backyard filled with men and women and children.
Welcome to your execution, Wolf.
Chapter 16. Sam. I trembled with rage as Dane and I awaited the arrival of the cavalry. Dexter and Grayson and every other alpha and beta wolf in the pack were on their way. We needed help taking down these bears and rescuing our alpha. We couldn't do it on our own. And so I trembled with fear, a block away from the bears' apartment block. "What now?" Dane demanded, pacing the sidewalk and cussing as he went back and forth. I hung up the phone after I listened to the voicemail. "Tate, he's—" I swallowed. I knew he'd done it. Before I'd gotten the confirmation, I knew he'd gone to the bears and offered himself up. But to hear it on my cell was a whole other level of grief. I cleared my throat.
He's made a deal with the bears. His life for Celeste's, and peace between the two packs.
What? Dane glared at me. I glared back.
What the hell are you looking at me like that for?
This is your fault. You blamed him for what happened to Celeste.
So did you.
We all had, Claire included.
I didn't want him to die, though.
Dane's voice cut out halfway through his words. I swallowed the lump in my throat as I struggled to hold back a wave of grief.
I know. Neither did I. I was just angry.
Angry that fate had dealt us such an ugly hand. At Tate for being stupid enough to lie about the most important thing in our lives. And Celeste for believing what she'd heard and not coming to us to find out if it was true. I groaned as the realization hit. I was angry at Celeste, but I hadn't been able to feel that part of it. After what had happened to her that night, I'd pushed the anger down. But part of me felt betrayed. Betrayed that she'd snuck out to follow Tate like he was doing something wrong. betrayed that she'd run from us the first chance she got. Betrayed that she'd believed such an obvious and stupid lie. After everything we'd said and done for her, that one lie was what she'd believed. So much so that she'd endangered her own life and that of our daughter. And now her disbelief had endangered Tate's life too. I focused back on Dane as the screech and rumble of the pack's trucks pulled up and caught my attention. First things first. We have to save our Alpha before he becomes bear meat. The procession of cars and trucks filled up the whole street. The pack was here. Dex jogged straight to me. What's the situation? Tate's offered himself in exchange for Celeste and to stop any future attacks against the pack, so the bears have him and intend to kill him. They may have already done so. I didn't think they'd be so quick about it, but what did I know about the execution strategies of bear shifters? Dexter groaned. This was not meant to happen. Tate only said that stuff about Celeste to buy us some time to work out a better strategy than all-out war. I glanced behind me, where dozens of young, healthy men were piling out of their cars. Well, it looks like the war is on. Dexter nodded and went over to the rest of the pack members to explain what was going on. We need to go. Now. Dane nodded at a bunch of kids who'd spotted us. They looked like bears somehow, and when they began to run, we went after them. We didn't want them alerting the adults to our presence. Dex! Gray! We ran, following the kids to a huge apartment block and straight through the front door of the place. We could hear a ruckus in the backyard and charged down the corridor to where a horror story was unfolding before me. Tate was chained up against the fence, and it looked like they were taking turns beating him up. He was naked, bleeding and sliced. No! The shift came on me faster than it ever had. I ran straight at the man with the knife, who was poised to stick it straight into Tate's belly. I clamped onto his wrist and ripped flesh from bone. Blood spurted through my teeth, and I growled as I tore harder. That's when the screaming began. Women began to run, grabbing children, as my pack charged for the men. Bear shifters began to shift and charge the wolves. The fight was on. Whether we meant to begin a war or not, it seemed we were in one. I stood in front of Tate, growling and snapping at anyone who attempted to approach. Then Dane's small brown wolf bounded past me and shifted back to human. Oh, damn it, Tate. What have you gone and done now? Dane complained, as he pulled at the bonds, managing to get Tate off the fence. I glanced at my Alpha. His arm was hanging at a weird angle. His gut was partially sliced open, and as he fell forward and grabbed his belly, I almost vomited. They'd actually gutted him, or tried to. Part of his belly was spilling through his fingers. I whirled around at the sound of vicious growling behind me. A huge black bear was down on all fours, charging me. It was Trevor. He was dead. I ran straight at the bear, using the momentum to jump over him before twirling back and biting at his ears. His claws swung at my head. I rolled and ducked and went for his hind legs. Then there was another black wolf, flashing into my vision, coming to help me, and two huge silver wolves beside him. It was us against them. 2 alpha and 2 beta wolves, taking down an alpha bear. I tore at his neck, sinking my teeth in and drawing blood. This wasn't a fight where we'd just walk away after our point was made. No. One side had to lose. Permanently. And it couldn't be us. Dexter's wolf tore at Trevor's eyes and face. The other bears began to back away, not stepping up to support their alpha, but instead running for their lives. Some of our other wolves went after the bears that ran, But I stayed and shifted back, my heart pounding in my chest as my human eyes took in the state of my alpha. He was on his knees with Dane beside him. Oh, God. They'd burnt his face and gashed his ear, too. "We need to get you to the hospital. Let's go." Dane and I put our arms around Tate, and he groaned in agony.
"My shoulder's broken."
I tried to avoid touching his injuries, but it was almost impossible with the amount of wounds and blood on him.
"Your belly's more of a worry at the moment, Tate."
"Let's go," I said. I dragged my alpha to our car, and we rushed him to emergency. At this rate, we were going to need to build a hospital in our own town. Dane. My alpha was in surgery, my mate was recovering from falling down a cliff, and my daughter was in a humidicrib because she'd been born prematurely and by emergency C-section. I put my head in my hands and closed my eyes. "Things can't possibly get any worse," I muttered to Sam, as we sat in the horribly uncomfortable white chairs that lined the hospital waiting room. My stomach was in knots. "I hope everyone else from the pack is okay." Sam patted me on the shoulder. "Our pack is alive. Let's hold on to that. We'll find out about everyone else soon, I'm sure." I stood up and stretched my back. "I'm going to see Celeste and the baby." Sam nodded and ran his hand through his hair. "I'm going to stay here and wait for the surgeons to come out and tell me about Tate." "Okay. Thanks, Sam." I walked away from my beta, my whole body feeling like it had been put on a torture rack and stretched. What a day. I pushed open the door to stop dead at the sight before me. "She's out," I said. Celeste was breastfeeding our daughter, her beautiful flesh pressed against our daughter's bare skin. Celeste looked up and beamed at me. "They said she's doing way better than they expected, and I finally got to hold her. To nurse her. Look how strong she is." I walked up next to the bed and watched as the baby suckled strongly. I kissed my mate's forehead, the warmth in the room making Celeste feel hot to the touch, even in the light gown she barely wore. "You're amazing. She's amazing. Hey, have you thought of a name yet?" She looked up at me, her blue eyes big and wide. "I have, but I wanted to ask Tate before I told anyone else. Where is he? Is he okay?" "Not really." I grabbed a chair that leaned against the wall and pulled it over to sit closer to my mate. I couldn't resist reaching out and stroking the baby's soft head. "She has blonde hair." Celeste grabbed my wrist. "Dane, how's Tate?" I ran my hand through my hair. He's not dead. Tell me he's not dead." Her voice sounded panicked, and I rushed to reassure her. "He's not dead." That was all I could tell her, though. "Then where is he?" "He's in surgery." She swallowed hard, her already pale skin going even more pale. "Why? I mean, what's the surgery for?" I didn't really want to recall all the injuries my alpha had sustained. Dislocated shoulder, knife wound to the belly, burned face, cut off ear. Tears sprouted and slid down Celeste's face. "Burned face, knife, oh my God." I grabbed her hand and squeezed it. "I suppose we have to be grateful the bears were taking their time killing him, or we may have arrived too late." "I don't know what to say. Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know." She began to cry as she rocked the baby. "Dane, I didn't want this to happen. Not like this. I mean, I was so angry at him, but now—" I stroked her head and kissed her hair. "I know. It puts it all in perspective, doesn't it?" She nodded. "Yes, it does." The baby came off Celeste's, her eyes closed and her mouth still open. Milk dribbled down the side of her face. Do you want to hold her?
I glanced down at her. I'd love to, but I'm not very clean. I gestured down to my clothes that were some of the spares we kept in the car in case of emergencies. Celeste put the baby over her shoulder and gently rubbed her back.
So what's going to happen? Do you know?
I shook my head. I have no idea. Wolf shifters have abnormal healing powers, which is probably one of the reasons the baby is doing better than they all expected. We're strong and fit and healthy, but Tate's injuries were extensive. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. We can only wait, I suppose. Sam's sitting in the waiting room now. Celeste nodded, then sobbed softly.
I can't believe this all happened. Actually, I can. I always knew my baggage would haunt us, follow me. But I never thought. I hoped it would all be okay.
I could see the tide had turned, and Celeste was going to start to blame herself now. Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. It's no one's fault, really. It's some twist of fate. A lesson we needed to learn, a fire we had to walk through. I don't know. But the only thing I need to know is if you'll still love us when this is all settled. I stared at her, hoping, praying that these past few days hadn't changed her mind about us. She gasped for air, as though she'd been holding her breath.
Of course I still love you. Loving you all has never been a problem, but after I heard Tate say what he said, I felt so betrayed, so hurt. I couldn't believe that after everything we'd been through.
She stopped, gasping for air again, and that's when I grabbed her hands and made her look at me. That's exactly where you should have stopped, turned around, and demanded an answer from Tate. And if not from him, then me or Sam. You can't just run away at the first hurdle, Celeste. That's not what this relationship is about. There's 3 of us to check on, and you can't run because one of us pisses you off. That's not fair to anyone. Celeste nodded and gulped. I grabbed a glass of water and handed it to her.
Yes, I know,
she said, once she'd taken a few sips from the glass. Good. Because we adore you. Every single tiny part of you. She nodded and swallowed some more water. I sighed, utterly exhausted. I hadn't slept properly in 2 days, and I couldn't even reach out to my daughter because there was blood on my hands. Quite literally. Excuse me while I go wash up a bit in your bathroom. I opened the door and ran water into the sink, wiping at my face, my hands, my arms.
What happened with the bears? You didn't tell me.
I ducked my face under the water and washed away the grime of the morning. Then I patted myself dry with one of those small white hospital towels, then threw it on the floor in the corner. Sorry to the staff member who had to launder that one. I walked back into the room to watch Celeste swaddling up the baby, then holding her while she slept. I don't know completely. We were winning when I left, but I needed to get Tate to the hospital, so we'll have to wait to find out from one of the other alphas. Hopefully there weren't many casualties on our side. She nodded, then put the baby into the crib beside her bed.
Okay, but will they still be after us? Is Trevor?
Oh, no. I kept forgetting she wasn't there. We killed Trevor. He's gone. And a lot of the male bear shifters, too. Celeste's eyes widened again, and her skin turned even more pale.
Well, that's great, I suppose.
Are you okay? I understood that she'd be feeling a combination of happiness and sorrow. After all, they had been her family for a very long time.
Yes, I just never thought I'd be happy that someone was dead.
I almost laughed, but thought I might get slapped if I did. Instead, I sat next to my mate and held her hand. I get that.
So what do we do now?
We wait.
Chapter 17. Tate. Damn, my head hurt. I forced my eyes to open, though they didn't want to. There was Sam by my side. In a stark white room I had to assume was the hospital.
Hey.
I swallowed, trying to make my mouth work properly. I was as dry as the desert.
Hey yourself,
Sam said, standing up.
How are you feeling? Like I got pulled through a hedge, backwards.
Everything hurt. My head, my chest, my belly, my legs.
Yeah, well, you did a pretty good job of almost dying, but we weren't going to let you. How?
Oh. The memories of this morning came back to me in a flash of pain and knives and cruel laughter.
The bears.
Yes, the bears.
What were you thinking, giving yourself over to them?
He sounded angry at me, which was strange. After everything that had happened with Celeste, I'd thought Sam would be relieved to get rid of me.
I was fixing all our problems in one go. The bears would leave the pack alone, and you three could be happy without me.
That got me a soft punch in the arm.
Ow.
My head spun from the pain, and he shoved a handle into my palm.
Push this button. It's morphine.
I glanced down at the green button and pressed it. Anything to help with the throb in my brain.
Thanks.
I lay my head back and tried to swallow again. It was like the desert in my mouth.
Is there any water?
Sam handed me a cup and I swallowed some down, the brief wetness enough to get my tongue to unstick from the roof of my mouth. I closed my eyes, the pain dragging on me.
How's Celeste? Is she okay?
There was silence in response to my question, and then the whoosh of a curtain. How about you ask her yourself? I lifted my head and opened my eyes. There was my beautiful mate standing in the doorway. Her hair fell around her like a halo, and she held our baby in her arms. Tears filled her eyes as she stared at me. I tried to smile, unsure of the response I'd get from her. I was pretty sure last time we'd spoken, she'd broken up with me.
Hey, beautiful.
Celeste sobbed as she threw herself down onto the bed with me. I suppressed my groan of pain as she placed her head on my chest, the baby cradled between us. Tate! Oh my God! You're okay! She lifted her face to me, her eyes shiny with the unshed tears. She'd forgiven me. I tentatively reached down with my good hand and cupped her face.
Of course I'm okay. How are you?
She sobbed again and pushed herself up so that she could kiss my lips, the saltiness of her tears on my tongue. When she pulled back, my heart ached. I'd missed her love so much. She sniffed and wiped at her face. I was so worried about you. I am so sorry about what happened the other night. I should never have even been there, let alone believed the lies you told the bears. I should have known better, and I am so sorry for everything. Tears fell down her face, and I looked to Sam for guidance. He just sat in the chair, watching and waiting. I rubbed her back with my good arm, then pulled it back in close to me, the pain too great to move far.
Stop crying, Celeste. It's okay. I totally understand why you wanted me to move out. It's your right to reject any one of us if you have cause. And you did. But I couldn't stand by while my pack and the whole town was in danger. I saw a way out for all of us. So I took it.
Celeste hoisted up the baby and placed her on my chest on her stomach. She was the most perfect little thing. Rosebud lips and pale, soft skin. I would have missed all of this. Celeste shook her head. No, you should have stayed and fought to remain in our family. This little girl needs her daddy, and I don't want you to ever, no matter what, think of leaving us again. I promise you, it will be the same for me. No more running away." I looked at my mate, and then back to my daughter, my eyes burning with the strangest feeling. I swallowed hard. Did this mean that everything was okay? That they still wanted me?
"What have you called her?"
Celeste smiled and stroked the baby's head. "I haven't named her anything yet. I wanted your approval." I raised my good arm to touch my baby's soft hair.
"All right. What would you like to call her?"
Celeste met my gaze, and I saw a lot of love and uncertainty there. "Destiny. After all, it was destiny that brought us together." I smiled as the sound of our daughter's name rolled around the room.
"Sounds perfect to me. Contingent on the rest of the family's approval, of course."
I glanced at my Beta and Omega, both of whom nodded happily.
"We're happy with anything you choose." "Destiny, then."
I lifted my daughter up higher on my chest and kissed the top of her head. Celeste leaned close and rested her cheek against my shoulder. I had to ask. My head was whirling with all the uncertainties left.
"So we're okay. After I get better, I can come home."
I never thought I'd have to ask my pack such a thing, and Sam's eyes were shadowed as he stared at me.
"It's only a home with you in it, Tate. You're the foundation of everything in our family."
I blinked away the tears that gathered in my eyes once again and put it down to all the drugs in my system. I let my body relax into the pillows and looked at my family. They weren't going anywhere, and thanks to a stroke of luck, now, neither was I. Epilogue. A year later. Celeste. I looked down at the white stick and smiled as my stomach flipped over. 2 pink lines. Clear and visible. I was pregnant. Again. Oh. We'd celebrated Destiny's first birthday only yesterday, and I'd been feeling a little queasy all day. I'd had my suspicions, of course, but I'd wanted to wait until after the party to do an official test. Unlike that day all those months ago when I found out I was pregnant the first time, this day would be cause for celebration, not despair. What a difference a year and a half made. I slid the cap back on the test stick and placed it into my back pocket. The men were out, but they'd be home for lunch soon. "How you going, baby girl? You ready to get changed?" Destiny was sitting in her high chair, having inhaled a banana, a sandwich, and some berries. She ate more than I did. I glanced at the clock and counted. I had about 10 minutes before my triad arrived home. "Let's go, beautiful girl." I picked up my daughter and carried her to the nursery, cleaning the crumbs and berry smudges off her angelic face. I squealed a little as I opened the new T-shirt and changed her into the outfit that I'd ordered online. It had arrived last week and was a perfect fit for my daughter. I stood her up and she teetered a little. Her T-shirt read, "I'm going to be a big sister." "Perfect!" Destiny toddled over to the corner of her room and began to play. What a year it had been. Tate had spent months recovering from his injuries and surgeries. The wolf genes helped his healing tremendously, but it still took a long time before everything was well again, both with him and with us. But every day we'd worked on rebuilding the trust again. Every day I loved them all that little bit more. So much so that now, if I heard them tell anyone I wasn't their fated mate or they'd get rid of me to save the pack, I'd laugh in their face. My men lived and breathed our family. They loved me and my daughter, and since the moment I put Destiny on Tate's chest, I hadn't looked back. Not at that night I thought they wanted to get rid of me. Not to my horrible childhood or the months before I met Tate. My life was blessed. I was Cinderella in my fairy tale, and I had 3 Prince Charmings to love, and who loved me back. Every single day. "Celeste!" My heart leapt as they entered the house, loudly, as they always did. "Daddy!" Destiny called out as she stumbled, trying to run past me. She got a few more steps into the living room before she fell to the floor and cried as she always did. Tate laughed as he scooped her up and showered her with kisses.
"How's my perfect girl? Have you been good for Mummy?"
Sam came for me first, which was nice, and gave me a swift kiss.
"Are you okay? You looked a little pale this morning."
I nodded. "I'm great. How was work?"
"Busy."
Dane came in and shut the door, grabbing for Destiny and whirling her around.
"Something smells good. What's for lunch?" he asked.
None of them had noticed Destiny's top yet, and my stomach was in knots, waiting for them to discover the surprise. Of course, I assumed they'd be happy about the new pregnancy. After all, they put in daily efforts to make sure I was constantly filled with their desire for me. But it didn't stop the anxiety that rattled through me. Lamb curry. I wanted to try a new recipe."
"Great. I'm starving."
The men all piled into the kitchen, and I started serving them, putting lots of rice in every bowl, as I knew how many calories they burned through in a day.
"Hey, Celeste."
There was a strange note in Dane's voice. "Yeah?" I asked, as I put each bowl down in front of my men. Dane was looking at me with a huge smile on his face.
"What does this mean?"
He pointed to Destiny's top, where she stood on his thigh and clung to his neck. He turned her around and showed the other two men, who went silent. My heart leapt in my chest, and I swallowed quickly, my hand trembling as I pulled out the stick from my back pocket. "Well, I'm pregnant." The three men looked at one another for a single second, then jumped to their feet, whooping loudly.
"That's brilliant!"
Sam grabbed me and kissed me, then Tate picked me up and twirled me around.
"How are you feeling?"
I put my hand out to steady myself. "A little woozy, but happy. Are you three happy too?" Dane kissed me soundly, still holding Destiny, then wrapped his arm around my shoulders.
"We couldn't be happier. More babies for our family, and a baby brother or sister for our perfect girl."
He nuzzled his nose against Destiny's face, who cackled and wriggled to get down. Dane put her on the ground and she toddled off to her room. My triads surrounded me, holding me in that long, intense way they had that always made me feel loved. "I love you. All of you," I said. "Thank you for my new life." Tate swung me into his arms and carried me up the stairs.
"Lunch can wait. I think we need to celebrate now."
Dane stayed with Destiny, and Sam followed us into our main bedroom. They'd swap after a while, and if I passed out from exhaustion, one of them would call into work and tell them they were taking the afternoon off. My life truly was perfect. I had my men, my child, and a village of people who loved and supported us. It seriously couldn't get any better than this.